Welcome to The Tired Thinker, where time folds back on itself in the quiet spaces between moments, and causality pauses to wonder who pushed whom first. Tonight's mystery belongs to time, to loops so elegant, so impossible, so already destined. The paradox of the past rewriting the present, the future reaching back to sculpt its own arrival. Each asks, if cause creates effect, what happens when effect creates cause? If a decision alters history before it's even made, what becomes of the timeline, that straight line we pretend exists? If you could stop your grandfather from living long enough to create you, who swung the pendulum of that choice? These aren't riddles with answers, but spirals to rest inside, to listen for echoes that might be origins, to feel the vertigo of wondering whether the loop ever began, or if it's just always been. So tonight, we'll trace the narrow corridor where past and future stare each other down. No panic, no panic, only the soft wonder of minds watching time think itself into knots. Before we begin, where in the timeline are you tuning in from? What hour loops by in your small corner of possibility? If these thought experiments find a home in you, I'd be grateful if you liked or subscribed, so more curious travelers can wander into contradictions that refuse to unwind. Now, let's begin. Time feels simple when we move through it in one direction. We wake up, we eat, we make plans, we close our eyes again. One moment becomes the next. Events seem to fall into a neat line. Cause leads into effect. A glass drops, the glass breaks. A match strikes, the fire lights. The world makes sense because each thing follows something else. But there are ideas in physics and philosophy that bend this neat order into a circle. These ideas suggest an effect might sometimes create its own cause. They describe a loop where the start and end trade places. The story has no first moment. Logic strains, and yet the loop holds together. Imagine a scientist who builds a time machine. She wants to share this invention with the world. She steps inside and travels 30 years into the past. She meets a younger version of herself in a small lab. She hands over the blueprints. The younger scientist studies them and begins the work that will one day lead to the time machine. Years pass. She finishes building the device. She steps inside. She travels back. She hands over the blueprints, and the loop closes. Who invented the time machine? The older scientist got the design from the younger one. The younger scientist got the design from the older one. There is no moment when the idea first appears. It just exists, real enough to touch, and yet without a true beginning. The effect and the cause feed each other. They stay locked in a circle that seems to defy reason. This kind of situation is called a causal loop. It shows up in physics when we think about time travel. It shows up in our questions about free will and destiny. If the future can shape the past, do we still choose anything? Or do we only follow the path the loop already wrote? Consider a simpler story. A tourist in a small town hears a folk song that everyone loves. It sounds old, passed through many hands. The tourist likes the melody. She writes it down. When she returns home, she teaches the song to her partner. Her partner becomes a musician and records it on an album. The album spreads. Years later, that same song plays on the radio in the small town. A young child hears it and grows up loving the tune. One day, he plays it in a cafe. A stranger visits the cafe. It is the tourist from long ago. She hears the song again. She writes it down again. Where did the song come from? Who first created it? There is no moment where it is composed. It lives inside a ring of events. The reason the tourist teaches it is because she once heard it. The reason she once heard it is because she later teaches it. The loop laughs at our desire for an origin. These loops seem playful, but they push deep questions. It's shown that our sense of time as a straight road might be a story we tell because it feels safe. Physics does not forbid all kinds of time travel. Some scientific models allow what are called closed time-like curves. They are paths through space and time that bend back to their starting point. If something moves along one of these curves, it might arrive at an earlier time in its own history. If it does something there, the story might twist into a causal loop. A famous example is the bootstrap paradox. It asks how information can exist without creation. Think again of the time machine blueprint. That design holds knowledge. If the loop has no first drafter of the design, then the knowledge appears from nowhere. The loop contains it, yet no one invents it. The bootstrap paradox gets its name from the old idea of lifting yourself by your own bootstraps. Here, knowledge lifts itself into existence. We can explore a darker version of a loop. Picture a time traveler who returns to deliver a warning to his younger self. He says that a terrible fire will destroy his home. The younger version feels fear. He decides to remove every candle, every spark. He installs alarms. He checks every wire. His caution grows into obsession. He throws out belongings. He fills the house with fireproof materials. The stress makes him tired. One night, he knocks a tool into the stove. Flames spread before he notices. The fire burns the home. Later, he rebuilds. He grows older. He remembers the ruin. He builds a time machine. He returns and warns his younger self. The warning causes the fire. The fire causes the warning. The loop holds tragedy in place. There is no way to break the chain because each moment depends on the next. Even small loops can tangle us. Imagine you write a letter to your future self. You place it in a box. You forget about it. Many years later, your future self travels back with the same letter and hands it to you. You open it. You read the words you once wrote. You put the letter in the box. One day, as an adult, you find the box and take the letter with you on a trip through time. You slip it into your younger hands. Which version wrote it first? The letter seems to appear on its own. Ink without an author. These examples feel strange because our minds expect stories to begin somewhere. A baby is born. A seed is planted. A decision forms. We hunt for a first cause. We want to point at a moment and say, everything grew from this. Causal loops deny us that point. They show events that rely on each other in a cycle with no start. Some scientists argue that if time travel is possible, the universe might enforce self-consistency. That means any trip to the past would only create events that already fit into the existing timeline. You could not change history in a way that breaks the loop. If you tried, something would stop you. The match slips from your hand. The door locks before you enter the room. The action that threatens the loop never succeeds. So the loop stands untouched. It keeps its shape. The effect remains the cause. The cause remains the effect. They circle forever. This kind of story invites a quiet kind of wonder. It challenges the idea that everything must follow a simple chain. It suggests our rules are not the only rules time can follow. Some events might not wait for permission from the past. Some knowledge might not need a beginning. Some choices might already be chosen. When effects create their own causes, the universe feels less like a line and more like a circle. The timeline bends back on itself. The answer arrives before the question forms. The world works, but not in the way logic expects. We trust the present because it feels solid. We step on the ground and the ground stays still. We make a cup of tea, and the tea waits for us. We assume the world we live in comes from what happened before. The past feels fixed, like concrete that's set long ago. We think nothing can reach backwards and change it. But if someone could visit the past, even for a moment, that moment could send ripples into the present. Those ripples might change everything we know. They might erase events we remember, or give shape to new ones that should not exist. When the past shifts, the present shifts with it. We lose the straight line we count on. Cause no longer sits only behind effect. Imagine someone invents a time device. It does not need to be a big glowing machine. It could be a small metal ring with a button worn on a finger. A scientist, curious and determined, presses the button and steps back 10 years. She does not try to change much. She walks streets she remembers from her childhood. She watches strangers pass. She sees her younger self seated at a cafe table, staring at homework. The scientist sits nearby and leaves a note on the table before walking away. The younger version picks it up. The note says, "You belong in physics. Do not give up." The younger self reads it and feels new confidence. She does not drop out of school. She goes on to study. She becomes a scientist. One day she builds a small metal ring with a button. She presses the button. She steps back 10 years. She leaves the note. Who wrote the note first? And what if she never returned to deliver it? Would she have quit school? Would she be someone else today? The act in the past shapes the person in the present. But that same person must exist in order to go back and shape herself. The loop feels fragile, yet it works because each version keeps the story alive. The past gets edited by the future, and the present becomes something new, something the original timeline never allowed. Take an everyday object. A photograph of a birthday party sits in a drawer. In the picture, a child stands with two parents behind him. The cake has blue candles. The faces look happy. The picture captures a moment no one can change. At least that is what we believe. Now picture a time traveler who knows that one parent leaves the family years later. He feels deep regret. He wants to fix the sadness he remembers, so he goes back to that birthday party. He arrives before the candles light. He watches the parents argue in the kitchen. He steps in and says one honest thing. He says, "The child needs you both." The argument stops. The parent who once left pauses and feels something shift inside. They stay. The family grows close again. The time traveler returns home. He opens the drawer. The photograph now looks different. The child smiles wider. The cake has more candles this time. The background shows a trip to the ocean, taken that same summer. The photograph changed because the past changed. Yet the time traveler remembers the first photo. He holds memories from a timeline that no longer exists. This kind of change creates a new version of the present. The old one fades like a dream. We might never know what vanished. We only see the world as it stands now. But the traveler remains the only witness to the history that disappeared. Even a tiny act in the past can send ripples. A dropped coin, a missed train, a conversation cut short. If those moments redirect someone's life, the present could look like a stranger's home. The ripple might spread far beyond the point where it started. Think of a scientist who goes back and gives a farmer a single seed from a future crop that resists drought. The farmer plants it. The harvest improves. The village thrives. More children grow strong. Some leave to study science. One of those children later helps discover a cure for a disease. In the original timeline, that disease took lives for decades. Now it loses its power. A simple act brings wide change. It reaches millions who never know a time traveler acted. Backward ripples do not need dramatic events. They can hide in quiet choices. A traveler might return to tell someone to take a different road home. That change could prevent an accident, and the saved person might become a teacher who inspires many students. Those students might become doctors, artists, parents, builders. The present fills with lives that would not have been. Every moment links to countless others. But what if the ripple erases the traveler's reason to go back? This is the heart of the grandfather paradox. If someone prevents the event that led them to time travel, then what drove them to change the past? Picture a person who wants to stop a war. They go back and remove the spark that started it. The peace that follows means no war happens. In the peaceful present, no one invents the time machine designed to fix the conflict. Without the time machine, no one goes back. Without the trip, the spark remains. War returns. The timeline breaks itself. It folds and unfolds. It struggles to hold a shape. Some thinkers say the universe might choose a path that avoids contradictions. If you go back, you might only take actions that already fit into the timeline. You might try to change something, but events twist to keep the outcome the same. If you try to prevent a discovery, someone else might make it instead. If you try to stop a meeting, chance brings the people together anyway. The ripple never grows large enough to break the present. This idea is called self-consistency. It protects the timeline from collapse. Others say the universe might split into many branches. When you change the past, the future branches into a new timeline. The old one keeps going without you. You create another world rather than rewrite your own. In that case, a ripple creates a new river. You step away from your history and into a different one. But if branches exist, how would you know which one you belong to? And who remembers the one you left behind? Backward ripples ask us to think about the present differently. They show that the present is not only built from what came before, it might also depend on what comes later. The moment we stand in could be shaped by choices not yet made. Even the smallest step into the past could be a hammer striking the structure of today. The idea reminds us that time is not a straight road. It might not be a road at all. It might be water. A drop falls here, and a wave forms there. A disturbance spreads in all directions. We think we move forward through time, but time might not respect our preferred direction. It might allow someone to turn around and press a hand against history. And when that hand pushes, the present shifts. Memories shift. Lives shift. The world we know becomes a version of itself that did not exist a moment earlier. A single step backward could be the start of a new reality, and everything familiar could change before we know it ever changed at all. We believe a person must come from somewhere, a birth, a family, a place. We count backward through the years and find a path that explains why we exist. Each moment rests on the one before it. We often take this chain for granted because it keeps our lives stable. But when we imagine time travel, we must face a strange idea. What happens if someone steps into the past and breaks the chain that led to their own life? If the traveler removes the reason they exist, do they fade first, or does the universe change around them before they know? Picture a young man named Eli. He grows up with one parent. His father died before Eli was born. The loss leaves a mark. Eli becomes obsessed with the idea of saving the life he never knew. He studies physics until he builds a device that can send one person back to a single point in time. He chooses the day before his father's death. He steps out of the machine, finds his father at a small diner, and warns him about the danger that lies ahead. The father listens. He changes his plans. He survives. Eli returns to the present, yet things feel strange. He looks around and sees unfamiliar photos on the walls. His mother smiles in them, but a different child stands by her side. The father survived, so life unfolded in a different way. A different version of a child was born. Eli does not appear in their story. Should Eli still exist? In one version of events, his father died, and Eli grew up with a mission to fix that. In the new version, the father lives, and Eli never needed to be born. The story pushes him out. Eli stands in a present where his origin never happened. He becomes a ghost in his own world. This is the heart of the grandfather paradox, but Ethan's case softens the edges. He interferes with his own lineage in a direct yet gentle way. Other versions of the paradox take a sharper form. A classic example asks, if a traveler goes back and stops his own grandfather from having children, then the traveler cannot be born. Without the traveler, the grandfather continues as he once did. Children appear. The traveler is born. He grows up and travels back again to stop the children. The loop cannot settle into a stable shape. It flips between outcomes. The traveler both exists and does not exist. The universe cannot decide. We can explore a quieter story. A scientist returns to her own childhood home. She sees her younger self playing with tools. She knows that one day, a curious spark in that girl leads to a career in time research. She decides to change that. She takes away a small clock the child loves to take apart and rebuild. She leaves the rest untouched. The girl grows up without that early drive toward science. She studies art instead. She does not invent a time device. No trip to the past takes place. That means no one comes to remove the clock in the first place. The clock stays. The scientist grows up again and removes it. This simple act causes a loop that cannot find balance. The adult version who travels back erases the version of herself who invents time travel. Yet without that inventor, no adult version exists to travel back. One action tries to erase the origin of the person who takes the action. So which version vanishes first? Does the adult fade from existence at once? Or does history rewrite itself slowly, like a page changing under wet ink? Some stories suggest that the universe responds the instant the cause disappears. If Eli stops the event that formed his life, his body might flicker, his memories might break apart, his voice might fail as though he is dissolving. In this view, the timeline protects itself from contradictions. The moment the cause of a person's life is removed, the person collapses into nothing. The paradox shuts down by removing the traveler before he can cause trouble. Other ideas suggest that the traveler remains an anomaly. The world builds a new timeline where he has no place, yet he continues because he came from somewhere. His origin might feel like a lost address. He remembers a past that no longer exists. He knows the people around him, but they do not know him. He is real, but only to himself. Now imagine another version of this problem. A traveler returns, not to destroy, but to help. A woman named Mara saw her parents lose their home when she was young. She wants to save them from that hardship. She travels back and hands them a small envelope of money. They use it to avoid the crisis. They keep their home, and the girl grows up in comfort. With no major struggle pushing her toward invention, she never seeks breakthroughs in science. She never builds a machine that can move a person through time. Mara, the traveler, stands in a present where she was never driven to build the machine she used. According to this new history, she should not be standing here. Yet she does. She feels out of step with the world. She knows a version of her parents who lived through hard nights and long days. The version in front of her does not share those memories. They look at her with warm but confused eyes. They do not understand the sadness in her voice. Their history erased the pain she remembers. In a paradox like this, who is the first to fade? The traveler? The memories? The machine? The version of the present that once existed? Maybe the world reshapes itself around the traveler, and every change arrives to meet them. The family home looks exactly the way it should for someone who never moved away. The machine might dissolve into spare metal. The traveler wakes to find a life that formed without their effort. In this version, the traveler does not disappear. The origin changes to match. Some thinkers say the universe might not allow these contradictions at all. They believe in a rule called self-consistency. If a traveler tries to change the past in a way that erases their own existence, something always stops them. They trip. They speak too late. They choose another path. The universe leans toward events that can hold together. The traveler cannot remove their origin because the timeline will not break. But others think the universe could simply split. When Eli saves his father, he creates a new branch. His original timeline continues without him. He does not erase himself. He steps into another version of history where someone else belongs. He becomes a visitor in a world that is close to his, but not fully his. His origin still exists somewhere, just not here. The vanishing traveler raises the same thought over and over. Can we ever escape the path that made us? If we remove the moments that shaped us, do we remove ourselves? Or do we linger as proof that time might have more than one answer? Most days, time feels simple. We wake up, we eat, we make choices, we watch the sun fall again. Each moment sits behind the next like cars in a train. We believe the first car pulls the others along. The past moves the present shapes the future. We do not question this because it keeps everything in order. But time travel invites a different picture. It asks, what happens when a future event slips into the past and becomes the reason that the same future exists? It asks how a cause and effect can trade places. It asks if there can be a moment that begins because of itself. This is the birth of a paradox. A timeline twists and loops back until its origin grows unclear. A knot forms where straight lines once lived. Think about a writer named Nora. She loves science fiction, but struggles to finish her first novel. She writes every night, but erases most pages. Her doubt grows. One evening, she considers quitting. Before she decides, a package arrives at her door. The return label is blank. Inside, she finds a printed book. The author name reads Nora Smith, her own name. She flips through the pages and sees the story she has been trying to write. Every scene appears. The characters breathe. The ending lands with grace. Nora studies the book. She decides to finish her draft by copying the words. She submits the manuscript. Years pass. The novel is published. It spreads. One day she signs a copy and marks it to her younger self. She sends it back in time, knowing it will arrive on the night she considered quitting. The book exists. It changed Nora's life. But where did the story come from? Nora did not create it from her imagination. She copied what the future version of herself had already written. The future book shaped the present book. Yet the present book becomes the future book. The story never had a first author. It appeared from a loop that feeds itself. The timeline ties itself in a knot that logic cannot untangle. This kind of loop draws attention because it breaks our sense of causation. Our minds want answers that start at a beginning. We look for the first step. We search for the moment where the idea sparked. In Nora's case, there is no spark. The flame burns, but nothing lights it. We can explore a different example. A new technology shows up on the market. It changes how people communicate. The device can translate any language without delay. It brings distant cultures together. No one knows who first designed it. Its patent seems to appear with no inventor. A time traveler sees the device and decides to bring one back to the year before it releases. She hands it to a group of engineers and tells them to reverse engineer it. They copy the circuits and code. They build the exact same device. When they release it, society changes again. The time traveler finds the new device and brings it back once more. A tool that reshapes the world has no first creator. It exists because it must exist. It does not rely on invention. It relies on its own future. This is called a bootstrap paradox. Something, a book, a piece of knowledge, a machine, comes into existence without a clear source. The timeline sustains it, even though time should not allow it. Not all paradoxes come from inventions or stories. Some come from personal choices. Picture a young woman walking down a busy street. She feels lost about her future. A stranger stops her and says, "In not worry, you become someone strong." That message comforts her. She starts making bold decisions because someone once told her she would. She grows into the person the stranger described. Years later, she walks the same street. She sees her younger self. She steps forward and repeats the same words. Her confidence came from her future self. But if the future self never spoke, would she still grow strong? The loop makes sure she does. Cause folds into effect, and effect folds into cause. A paradox does not only live in science fiction or theory. Physics offers structures called closed time-like curves. These are paths that bend through space-time in a loop. Something moving along such a path could meet a version of itself in the past. If it interacts, a loop may form. The event supports itself. No starting point exists inside the loop. The past and future act as partners. Some thinkers argue that paradoxes show why time travel must be impossible. They say the universe cannot allow actions that remove their own cause. They think logic must protect reality. Yet others believe paradoxes might be part of how time works at a deeper level. They say we only struggle because our sense of time is limited. We see progress, we see change, but maybe time holds loops with the same ease it holds lines. Imagine a person named Devin who wants to prevent a discovery that brings harm to many people. He reads old reports and finds that one scientist made a mistake that set everything in motion. Devin decides to travel back and stop that mistake. He finds the scientist in a quiet lab late at night. He warns him about the danger of his work. The scientist listens. He changes direction. He avoids the harmful discovery. Devin returns home. He expects a safer world. Instead, he sees no record of the machine he used to travel. He finds no trace of his own involvement. The future he knew is gone. He cannot locate the moment when the idea to travel back formed. His own motive fades. He saved the world from harm, but he erased the event that shaped him into the person who cared enough to save it. He remains as someone without a reason. His purpose hangs in air that now feels thin. Paradoxes like this show a hard tension. If the future removes the cause that made the future, then what holds things together? Does the universe change the outcome to avoid the break? Does it let two versions of reality exist side by side? Some believe that every paradox creates a branching world. The first timeline continues on its path, while the new timeline grows out of the change. No contradictions, no vanishing causes. The traveler steps into a different world. A knot forms, but the rope separates instead of twisting tighter. The paradox becomes a doorway rather than a trap. Others think that the universe might keep events consistent without splitting. A paradox tries to form, but subtle turns keep the knot loose. The writer cannot finish the copied book. The inventor cannot hand over the machine. The traveler misses the meeting. The loop does not lock. The original timeline stays safe. Regardless of the explanation, the idea remains striking. A paradox does not wait for our approval. It blooms when time folds back on itself. It grows from the moments when the future holds the past in its hands. When timelines tie themselves in knots, the beginning and the end become one. The story works, yet the origin vanishes. Memory feels like proof. It tells us what we lived through. It gives shape to who we are. We trust it because it carries details only experience can teach. The sound of a mother's voice, the smell of a childhood room, the look in someone's eyes during a hard goodbye. We hold these moments and believe they come from a single history that never changes. The past happened and memory records it, but time travel challenges that belief. If someone changes the past, then the world we know might shift in ways we cannot see coming. The present can become a version that did not exist before. In that new version, events might unfold differently. People might meet earlier, or never meet at all. Someone born in one timeline might not exist in another. Yet the traveler might still remember the old days, even if the timeline has erased them. A person could wake up with memories of a life that no longer happened. Imagine a woman named Lena. She remembers a quiet neighborhood where she spent her early years. She remembers a best friend named Joel who lived across the street. She remembers climbing trees with him and sharing lunch on school days. But now, she stands on that same street and sees a tall apartment building where Joel's house should be. The families she once knew do not recognize her. Her friend does not exist here. The world changed, but her memory did not. How could that happen? Lena once traveled back in time and saved her mother from a car accident. She acted with love and fear and hope. She returned to her present, expecting a better life. And she did find one. Her mother stands alive beside her, but the neighborhood changed. Her mother chose a different job in this new timeline. They moved before Lena had a chance to meet Joel. Those years together never took place, and memory remains real to Lena because she lived it in another version of the world. That version now sits unwritten. The timeline replaced it with one shaped by her travel. Yet memories hold on. They become traces of a path that branched away. This raises a question. If a memory describes something that no longer happened, does it still count as a memory? Or is it now more like a dream? Think about a man named Theo who remembers seeing a news report about a major disaster. He remembers the fear that spread across the city. He remembers the week of chaos that followed. Then a time traveler arrives from the future, determined to prevent that disaster. She succeeds. When Theo checks his phone, the headlines show nothing but normal days. People go about their lives unaware that anything was once different. Theo still sees the disaster when he closes his eyes at night. He sees broken buildings and faces filled with dust. He remembers, but the world disagrees with him. If he mentions the event, people look confused. They tell him it never occurred, and they have proof. They can check records and find nothing. They can show pictures of calm streets taken at the exact time he swears the sirens sounded. The present holds no sign of the disaster. Yet Theo keeps its memory alive in his mind. In a paradox like this, memory becomes evidence of a timeline that vanished. It shows that the past is not locked. It can shift, and when it shifts, the traveler becomes a witness to a world that others cannot see. There are softer versions too. A small change, an object moved, or a conversation altered, might create only a ripple. A person might feel a sense of déjà vu in places they have not visited. They might know the answer to a question they never studied. They might pause when meeting a stranger and feel a bond without reason. These impressions could be leftover memories from paths that once existed. Sometimes, the memories might clash. A child remembers their father reading bedtime stories, but the father now works the night shift and claims he never read a single book. A student remembers sitting in a classroom beside a friend who is now attending a different school entirely. A musician remembers writing a song that someone else recorded first. Each memory may feel true, but find no support in the new world. These experiences can cause confusion. They can shape identity in unexpected ways. Someone who remembers failure in a previous timeline might carry fear into a successful present. Someone who remembers love that never took place might feel longing no relationship can fill. A timeline shift might give a life more joy, but the memory of pain might remain as part of who someone became along the way. Some theories suggest memory could act like luggage carried through time. When the timeline changes, a traveler does not lose what they learned. The brain keeps the record, even if the record no longer matches reality. Others see memory as a thread linking different versions of the self. Even if the world forgets what once happened, the mind holds the connection. A future change might even restore what was lost. A timeline might fold back. Forgotten friends might return. Familiar events might unfold again. Then the memory that felt strange becomes a perfect fit. The idea of memories from worlds undone shows how fragile our sense of reality can be. Past feels stable only because we assume no one has reached into it. But if someone has, then memory becomes a rare kind of proof, a personal archive of paths that might have happened or once did. If time allows more than one history, then the mind becomes a place where those histories echo. Some echoes fade, others ring loud, and a person can stand in a world that claims one truth while remembering another that slipped away. We like to think the past shapes every moment in front of us. We walk through life believing that history sits behind us like a solid wall. We tell ourselves that what has already happened cannot change. It feels safe to think of time as a straight line with a clear direction. The past pushes the present pushes the future. We accept this flow because it keeps the world simple. But stories of time travel and some ideas in physics ask us to consider another path. They suggest the future might reach back and shape the events that lead to it. Instead of the past building the present might depend on something that has not happened yet. The future acts like a silent architect. It works behind the scenes to build the world that allows it to exist. Imagine a girl named Rena, who grows up fascinated by astronomy. One night, she sees a message carved into a stone near her backyard. It reads, "Look up at the comet on your 15th birthday." The message feels strange. It looks old. The stone feels like it has always been there. She remembers those words for years. On her 15th birthday, she sets up a small telescope. She sees a comet no one expected. She takes notes and images. Those records help her win a scholarship. Years later, she becomes a scientist who helps discover new ways of exploring space. One day, she travels through time as part of a research mission. She visits her old neighborhood. She sees a familiar stone. She carves a message into it. She writes, "Look up at the comet on your 15th birthday." The future version of Rena gives her younger self the reason to look up. The message starts her career, yet that career is the reason she writes the message. The future builds the past. The cause and effect wrap around each other. There is no first push. The loop needs itself to stay alive. This kind of story invites questions about how events begin. We usually search for a starting point, but in a loop like this, the beginning and end share the same space. The timeline becomes a circle instead of a line. Think about a musician named Alex, who composes a song that moves people to tears. The melody feels familiar to him from the first note. He does not know why. The audience loves it. The song spreads across the world. Years later, an older Alex travels back in time for reasons that feel personal. He meets his younger self playing in a quiet park. He sings the song to him because he wants to share comfort. The younger boy listens and keeps the tune in his mind. He grows up and the melody finds him again. He writes it down. He performs it. He changes lives with it. But where did the song come from? The child learned it from the older version. The older version learned it from the child. The loop holds the melody, but nothing outside the loop creates it. Events like these show how a future moment can act like a guide, steering past actions without revealing itself. The future does not shout. It whispers through hints, messages, or actions that blend into ordinary life. Sometimes the influence can be emotional rather than physical. Think of someone who grows up believing they are meant to help others. They feel certain of this purpose, though they cannot explain why. Later, they meet a time traveler who thanks them for saving many lives in the future. That moment of thanks gives the person the strength to take the steps that lead to that future. Their confidence comes from something that has not yet happened. Their future self, or someone influenced by them, becomes the architect of their own past motivation. There are harder examples too. A scientist tries to stop a dangerous event that will occur decades from now. She returns to a key moment and makes a change. Because of her action, the terrible event never takes place. Yet the very disaster she stopped gave her the reason to build her time device. Without the disaster, she would not have built it. Without the device, she could not stop the disaster. The timeline reshapes itself, yet her presence in the past remains. Her future gave her the instructions. Her younger world now holds the results. Silent architects can also take the form of technology. A device appears in a laboratory from a future era. Engineers study it. They learn new physics from it. They use that knowledge to build machines that lead to advancements. One day, someone uses a new machine to send the original device back in time. Progress did not start in the past. It was planted by the future. If the future shapes the past, does free will still matter? The person carving the message on the stone believes they chose to do so. The musician believes he wrote the song. The scientist believes she built the device to change her world. Each action feels intentional because the actor still took each step. They still felt fear, hope, and drive. Yet the idea that the future helped guide those steps changes how we think about choice. We often see the future as a blank space waiting for us to fill it. But if time can bend, the future might already sit in place. It might reach back and adjust the world so that we walk the path we are meant to walk. We might not know that we are carrying instructions left by ourselves or others from the years ahead. If someone experiences a sudden spark of inspiration, they might think it came from their own mind. If they sense a warning inside their thoughts, they might trust instinct. But perhaps something ahead nudged them. A future outcome might depend on that moment. The architect hides behind the structure, unseen but not absent. The future shaping the past does not need a time machine or a dramatic event. It could be one decision that seems small at the time. A person hesitates before stepping into the street. A phone call comes at the right moment. A stranger's face seems familiar enough to trust. Those moments might feel tiny, but they can hold the entire weight of a timeline. The idea of silent architects shifts how we see cause and effect. The past and future might work together instead of fighting for control. Both ends of time might hold each other upright, forming a loop that keeps the story steady. We think we move forward, building life step by step, but it might be that the future is already there, watching, shaping, making sure we arrive. Time feels like sand falling in one direction. We watch moments slip from future to present to past. Once they fall, they seem gone. We accept this because the world behaves in ways that support it. Dropped eggs do not leap back into shells. Smoke does not gather itself into a candle. Broken plates do not pull their pieces together on the floor. Causes lead to effects. Effects do not become causes. This order gives us confidence that life has a structure we can trust. But if time could reverse its flow, even for a moment, that structure would crack. Events might start to undo themselves. People might move back toward their origins. The world might rebuild what it once destroyed, not with care, but with a force that denies what we think is possible. A reversed hourglass makes us ask what happens when the arrow of time points the other way. Imagine a scientist named Arun. He studies entropy, the measure of disorder in the universe. In normal life, entropy increases. Things fall apart. Heat spreads out. Systems lose structure. Arun builds a device he believes can reverse small pockets of entropy by nudging time. He tests it on a shattered glass. The shards tremble on the table. They slide toward the center and lift into the air. They seal themselves back into a full glass. For a moment, Arun feels amazed. The world just moved backward. He tries the machine on other objects. A lit candle pulls its smoke back down and restores a smooth, unused wick. Melted ice returns to a solid cube. A burned letter regains its ink and lies flat again. These objects behave as if time refuses to stay in place. Now, imagine Arun takes this device outside the lab. He activates it in a park. People freeze for a second. Then motion starts to reverse. A dropped ball rises into a child's hand before the child even bends down. Footprints fill and erase themselves on the path. Leaves climb back onto branches. Laughter returns to closed mouths. Words unspoken hang in the air as if swallowed by silence. Arun watches a moment he once lived unroll backward. What would that do to memory? A person walking could find themselves stepping in reverse without wanting to. They would remember walking forward, but see their body undo each step. They might feel dizzy, not from movement, but from the disagreement between mind and world. If time keeps reversing, speech might become impossible. The first word spoken becomes the last heard. The meaning of a sentence breaks apart. Picture a handshake in reverse time. Instead of joining palms, two hands begin in a friendly grip and then part with no introduction or agreement. In this version of the world, people might meet after they say goodbye. They might know each other before they ever talk. Actions lose their reasons. Reasons appear only after outcomes. A reversed hourglass also changes responsibility. In forward time, we act and then see results. We make mistakes and learn. But if time flows backward, the result comes before the action. A house built with years of work might collapse into a stack of raw materials, not due to neglect, but due to time pulling away the effort that once held it together. A person might unlearn their skills because they never practiced them. They might grow smaller and younger each day, watching their memories fall away one by one. Life could feel like a movie played in reverse. First wisdom, then childhood, then silence. Consider someone grieving a loss. In reverse time, that grief would soften not through healing, but through the event itself coming undone. A funeral might end with someone rising. Illness might start with recovery. But this does not bring comfort, because the relationships that gave the grief meaning would also unwind. Love could fade before it begins. Reunion might sting because it foreshadows separation. There is also a stranger consequence. In backward time, cause and effect trade places. A person might feel angry and then experience the insult that made them angry. They might hold a gift before anyone decides to give it. A criminal might serve a sentence before committing a crime. How do we judge someone whose action rewinds into intention instead of growing from it? Even physics would resist this new flow. Our bodies move because chemical energy breaks down in our cells. Those reactions depend on time moving forward. If time moves backward, those reactions would have to rebuild molecules instead of breaking them. Breathing might not make sense. Eating might undo hunger before food is swallowed. Life depends on forward processes that push the body away from perfect order. Reverse those processes, and the body might fall apart not because of damage, but because the structure that supports it no longer knows its job. One day, Arun pushes his device too far. He reverses time in a whole city. Cars drive backward, phones unsend messages. Buildings return to their old shapes as repairs vanish. People age in reverse, unsure why their reflections change. Arun stands at the center, watching everything unmake itself. He tries to turn the device off, but the switch slips into an earlier position each time he touches it. He wants to move forward, yet his actions pull him back. Each attempt cancels itself. Time has taken control. He notices that the sun in the sky has moved slightly. The clocks on the towers tick backward. If he does nothing, day will become morning, then night again, then yesterday. If this continues, history will fold back until his invention never exists. And if the machine never exists, nothing will stop time from moving forward again. But if time moves forward again, the machine remains possible. The moment becomes a loop around a single choice.
Arun realizes that in reverse time, choices are fragile. The device that gives him power also removes his ability to decide. When time flows upstream, it is not only objects that break. Understanding breaks, identity breaks, action breaks. The rules that let us move through life fall apart like sand running upward in the glass.
Most people think of themselves as one person moving through time in a straight line. You grow older, you make decisions, you look back and say, "That was me." You feel like one continuous story. But if time can bend, that story can split. A version of you might take a different turn. A version of you might have better luck. A version of you might make one small mistake that changes everything. Time travel forces us to think about what happens if those versions do more than exist in theory. What if they meet? Picture a man named Caleb. One afternoon, he stands in his kitchen, washing coffee mugs. He feels tired of the life he has. He wonders what might have happened if he had taken a job overseas when he had the chance. He worries that he missed his best shot at success. The thought sticks with him. Later that week, he walks home at dusk. A stranger steps out from behind a fence. The street light hits the stranger's face. Caleb sees his own eyes looking back at him. It is a version of himself from a different timeline. This other Caleb took the job overseas. He built a career that brought him recognition. He has stories from cities Caleb only saw on postcards. Both men feel shock. They each believe they are the real one. This is where the trouble begins. Each version has a memory that feels true. Each version has reasons for the choices they made. Their lives grew from the same start, but diverged. When they stand face to face, they see what could have been. The encounter becomes a test. It forces each man to look at his own decisions, strengths, and failures through someone else's eyes, eyes that match his own. Meeting another you is not only uncomfortable, it challenges identity. We build our sense of self from the choices that shape our path. But if someone else made different choices with the same starting point, then who is the real you? Is reality defined by existence or by potential? Another scenario shows this even more clearly. Imagine a woman named Maya who discovers a way to slip between timelines. She visits a world where she became a doctor. In that world, she is calm and respected. People rely on her in moments of crisis. The hospital halls echo with her purpose. Maya feels admiration and jealousy. She sees what she could have done with her life. She travels again. In another timeline, she pursued art. Her paintings hang in a gallery downtown. People study her work and feel moved by it. She stands in front of one piece and feels proud, but the pride belongs to someone who is not her. It belongs to a version who took a risk she never took. She keeps traveling. One world shows her married with children. Another shows her living alone in a small apartment, still searching for direction. She wants to gather the best moments from each version, but she cannot combine them. Each life depends on the choices that others did not make. If these versions met at the same time, conflict could grow fast. They might argue about which life had the most value. They might blame each other for lost opportunities. Jealousy could rise because each sees what they lack. Even admiration can hurt when it carries regret. There's also the question of responsibility. If one version commits harm, does it stain the others? They share a face, they share a beginning,
How far does guilt travel across timelines? A peaceful version might have to confront a violent version who made a different choice at the same crucial moment. They might say, "I would never do that," knowing deep down that they almost did. This kind of showdown does not require a fight. It can work quietly inside the mind. Meeting a different version of yourself forces you to look at your life without excuses. You cannot say, "I never had the option." You did. Someone exactly like you took it. The proof stands in front of you. But the opposite can happen too. A successful version might see the other as a warning. They might notice how one small shift could undo everything they built. That fear can tighten their grip on their current path. The meeting becomes a protective instinct. I need to stay who I am, or I become who you are. There is a deeper question as well. If time splits into many paths, then which version is in control? If one version learns something important, does it matter if the others cannot use that knowledge? Experience becomes locked inside a single timeline. No matter how many versions exist, each feels alone in their choices. Some imagine a moment where one version tries to take the place of another. A life that seems better might look worth stealing. The quiet Caleb might want the bolder Caleb's career. The artist Maya might long for the comfort of family. That desire could turn a meeting into a struggle. Identity becomes something to fight over, like a home that only one person can live in. The idea of you versus you reveals a truth we often ignore. We contain many possible selves. Every choice trims a branch from the tree of who we could become. We keep growing on one path. The others keep growing too, but out of sight. Time travel puts those other paths back in front of us. It asks whether we are proud of the road we took, or if we would trade places with the version who turned left when we turned right. Meeting another version of yourself forces a question no one wants to face. Are you the best possible you, or did you leave your better self behind?
Every person comes from a line of choices. Two people meet. They decide to stay together or walk apart. A moment of chance becomes a life. We rarely think about how fragile that line is. One change in the past could erase a birth in the present. Time travel forces us to look at that fragility up close. It asks what happens if you remove the event that allowed you to exist. If you break the chain, you break yourself. But if you break yourself, who was there to change the past? Picture someone named Jonah. He grows up hearing stories about a mistake his father made long ago. The mistake caused trouble that shaped the family's life for years. Jonah carries the weight of those stories. When he becomes a physicist, he dedicates his career to time travel. He builds a small machine and sets it to the exact year of the mistake. He travels back and stops his father before he makes that choice. There is no argument, no dramatic scene. Jonah gives a few careful words of warning, and the father listens. Jonah returns to his present expecting relief. Instead, he sees a different house, different photos, different lives. His father never made the mistake, so the family never moved to the town where Jonah's mother lived. They never met. Jonah should not exist, yet he stands there, alive, with memories no one else shares. His father looks at him and sees a stranger. The world remembers a path that does not include Jonah, but Jonah remembers the one that did. He becomes the parent of a ghost, his own life. This situation leads to a well-known problem in time travel called the grandfather paradox. If you go back and stop your grandfather from having children, you remove your own birth. Without you, there is no one to go back, but then the grandfather would have children again, and you would exist
and the loop repeats. Logic tries to make the timeline settle into one answer, but neither answer holds. The contradiction becomes the story. We can consider a smaller example that still breaks the chain. A woman named Elise wants to save her mother from heartbreak. She travels to the past and convinces her mother to leave a relationship early. The mother listens. She walks away before harm can reach her. She chooses a different partner later. A child is born, but not Elise. A new life stands in her place. Elise returns home and sees a sibling she never had. Her room belongs to someone else. Her face is not in any photo. Most of the world would say Elise is impossible, but she is still there. She acts like a traveler without a birthplace. Her memories and her existence do not match. She prevented the moment that created her. She saved someone she loves, but in doing so, she erased herself from the world she saved. Another version of this paradox can happen without family. A man named Tariq saves a stranger from being injured in the past. That stranger grows up and starts a project that changes global design standards for buildings. In the original timeline, a building collapse years later pushes Tariq into architecture school. He becomes one of the people who contributes to safety innovations. But in the new timeline, the disaster never happens. Tariq never gains that passion. He studies something else. He never joins the project to improve buildings. His role disappears. He remains alive, but the version of him who once existed is gone. He parented the ghost of his own future. Who decides which version stays? If the world follows a rule called self-consistency, then maybe time protects itself. It could block the traveler from making a change that erases them. Maybe Jonah trips before warning his father. Maybe Elise reaches her mother too late. Maybe Tariq cannot find the right street on the right day. The universe finds a way to keep the chain intact. Some people prefer this idea because it feels fair. It removes the contradiction by making sure it cannot happen. Another view says that changing the past creates a new branch. The original timeline continues. The traveler enters a different one. Jonah still exists in the world that created him. The new world grows from his action, but he is not part of it. He becomes someone out of place. He can watch, but he cannot stay. This solves the contradiction, but leaves the traveler alone in a world that sees them as a mistake. There is a third idea that feels more unsettling. The traveler remains only until the moment the new timeline catches up to their actions. Their existence fades like a memory losing detail. Jonah might stand in his new home and slowly forget the story that drove him to travel. Elise might wake up one day feeling like she is dreaming in someone else's body. Tariq might feel his interests change for reasons he cannot explain. They become the silent victims of their own success. A paradox like this asks who we are if the reason we exist disappears. Are we only real if the world around us agrees we belong? Or are we real because we remember our own story? Time travel lets a person protect someone they love or prevent something painful, but the cost could be their place in the world. You can become the parent of a ghost, your own life turning into something that never should have happened.
We think of history as something that stays in place. Once a day ends, it becomes a fact. Once a choice is made, it becomes a cause for what follows. We assume every moment stacks neatly on top of the last. But if time travel becomes possible, those layers might not stay steady. One change can buckle the structure. A timeline can twist and fold. When causes and effects collide in the wrong order, history can collapse under its own weight. Picture a man named Victor. He grows up during a long conflict that shapes his life. He loses his home. He watches friends leave. His future feels small. When he becomes an engineer, he builds a machine he hopes will fix the world. The machine can send him back 20 years. He chooses to stop the conflict before it starts. He arrives in the past, finds the leader who will one day start the war, and convinces him to take a different path. Victor finishes his mission and returns home. His city looks different. There are parks where ruins once stood. Schools and families fill the streets. Victor breathes with relief. But then the cracks show. He cannot find the lab where he once worked. The people who helped him build the machine never struggled with the conflict that gave them purpose. They never built the technology he used. Without the conflict, Victor's idea took a different form. The machine never existed. But if it never existed, Victor could not have traveled back. And if he did not travel back, the conflict still happens. The result destroys its cause. History tries to hold two versions of events at once, and neither version can fully stand. This is a paradox, and paradoxes strain timelines. When the logic fails, the chain of events bends until something gives. In one possible response, the universe corrects the contradiction. The timeline snaps back to the version where everything makes sense. Victor finds himself once again in the middle of the conflict, with the machine broken or gone. His memories remain, but the world denies that anything changed. Another response is subtler. The timeline tries to stretch and hold both outcomes. It becomes unstable. People remember different versions of the same event. A building might stand in one memory and collapse in another. Maps change without warning. News articles rewrite themselves. History loses its shape. It wrinkles, folds, and creases like paper crushed in a fist. Now imagine a journalist named Suri who investigates strange events. She finds records of inventions no one remembers creating. She finds photographs of people no one claims to know. She sees a statue one week and a blank plaza the next. She asks questions and hears conflicting answers. Some say a famous artist died years ago. Others say he painted a new mural last month. Suri keeps notes, but the notes do not always match the world around her. She becomes aware of a timeline trying to hold two different truths. She is living inside history that keeps changing its story. This collapse can shift even personal details. A person might look into a mirror and see a scar they do not remember earning. They might know a friend who suddenly remembers a different childhood. A family photo might show one sibling in place of another. These small changes reveal deeper instability. When contradictions grow too big, the world struggles to choose one path. Some scientists describe this as feedback. A change in the past loops forward and meets itself. If the change blocks the reason it happened, the loop breaks. The timeline cannot reach the same future twice. It folds back, it tries again, but each attempt only adds more tension. The flow of time becomes tangled. The result is not a split into clean branches, but a crumpling of the entire sheet. In fiction, this collapse might look dramatic. Buildings flicker, people blur, landmarks vanish. Time itself seems confused. But the real idea behind the image is simple. Causes need effects, and if they disconnect, the structure holding them together falls apart. There is another kind of collapse, one that happens quietly. Imagine a teacher named Elena. She remembers giving advice to a student that changed his entire future. Later, a traveler removes the event that caused the student to need that advice. Elena still remembers the moment, but the student's life now shows no sign of trouble.
The advice has no place in his story. Elena starts to forget why she thought it mattered. Her memory fades because the event no longer fits. The timeline smooths itself by erasing traces that create tension. The collapse hides itself by removing the parts that do not belong. Sometimes the universe might choose a path that avoids collapse. A rule called self-consistency suggests that only changes which keep the timeline stable can occur. If Victor tries to prevent the conflict, he might fail every time, not because of fate, but because the world refuses to break. His actions bend, but never snap the line. But if time travel introduces choices that cannot be undone, then a contradiction becomes more than a story problem. It becomes a structure failure. A timeline depends on things making sense in order. When a piece moves where it should not, the entire history can crumple under its own contradictions. Time makes sense to us because causes come first. We accept that a match must light before the candle burns. The traffic light must turn green before the car moves. We live from cause to effect, one step at a time. But if time can bend, the sequence might flip. Effects might appear before their causes. The future might show up early. We could wake up to results that no one earned yet. Imagine a man named Leo, who works as a clockmaker. He sets his tools on the bench each night before leaving the shop. One morning, he arrives and finds a new clock on the table. It matches his work style, even down to the small mark he leaves on the back of each piece. But he has no memory of building it. The gears are shaped with his skill. The paint matches the colors he likes to use. Customers admire it. They ask when it will be for sale. Leo stares at it, confused. Later that week, he plans a new design. It looks exactly like the mysterious clock. He builds it step by step. When he finishes, he realizes he created something he already had. The finished product came before the work. Where did the clock come from? If Leo made it in the future, then returned it to the past, the effect showed up early. The cause lagged behind. The event arrived yesterday, but the reason arrives tomorrow. This kind of loop makes the world feel out of order. A person might receive a letter that answers a question they have not asked yet. A solved puzzle might sit on a table before anyone starts it. A bruise might show up before the fall happens. Logic strains under the pressure. Picture a scientist named Hannah. She writes equations on a board late at night. She tries to unlock a new type of engine. The math blocks her. She falls asleep in the lab. In the morning, she wakes to find the full solution written in her own handwriting. She checks cameras and sees nothing unusual. She finishes the engine months later and then uses a prototype to travel a single day back. She goes to the lab where she slept. She sees herself resting. She writes the equation on the board and then leaves. In her view, the work seemed to appear from nowhere, but someone did write it. Herself from the future. The timeline still holds cause and effect, but the order is reversed. The effect offers guidance to the cause. The future supports the past so that the future becomes real. It feels wrong only because we expect all progress to move forward. There are personal examples too. A mother wakes with a feeling of joy and a clear image of a conversation she has not had yet. Later that day, her grown daughter calls with news. The mother's mind recognizes the scene. She remembers the words before they are spoken. She listens to the event she already lived in her thoughts. Was it a dream? Or did time allow her memory to arrive first? Sometimes we notice these moments only after they happen. A note appears that warns someone about trouble at work. They prepare for the problem. They fix it before it grows. The note's warning creates a safe outcome, but the safe outcome removes the problem that led someone to write the note in the first place. The effect eliminates its cause. What happens next? One answer says the note must vanish because the event that demanded it never happened. Another answer says the note stays because the timeline includes the loop. The warning and the prevention form a single event, even if logic wants to separate them. There are risks when effects move ahead of causes. If the event tells a person they succeed at something, they might stop trying. The success may vanish because the work disappears. If the event warns them about danger, they might panic and cause the danger. A future outcome can become fragile in the present. Knowledge has weight, especially when it arrives early. Imagine a small town where people see tomorrow's newspaper delivered each night. They read about a storm and rush to repair their roofs. The storm weakens before reaching them. The next night's paper shows sunny skies instead. The town starts to doubt the reports. A day comes when the paper warns of a flood. No one acts. The flood hits with no preparation. The cause changed because the effect arrived first, and belief did not follow. We often act based on what we expect, not what already is. When tomorrow arrives early, belief itself becomes part of the chain. The timeline bends around what people think is true. Even memory can turn strange. A person might recall celebrating an achievement before taking the test that earns it. They might feel heartbreak before meeting the person who will cause it. Emotions, like events, may run ahead of time. The mind receives signals from a path not yet walked. Some theories in physics allow this kind of backward influence. In quantum mechanics, a future measurement can appear to affect earlier conditions. The full picture remains mysterious, but the idea points to a world where the future is not silent. It can whisper directions. It can place outcomes in our path before we understand how we reach them. Time might not always lead us. Sometimes it might follow us. Sometimes the result shows the way. Sometimes tomorrow arrives last night and we spend today catching up. We trust that everything must come from somewhere. A painting needs an artist. A song needs a composer. A machine needs a designer. We believe each object, idea, and moment has a beginning that explains it. We feel uneasy when we cannot find that start, but time travel presents situations where the beginning hides or disappears. Some events seem to appear on their own. They do not start in the past or the present. They come from a loop that closes on itself. They reflect like a mirror that shows something real, yet nothing stood in front of it first. Imagine a musician named Eli who hears a tune in a dream. The melody feels clear and complete. When he wakes up, he writes it down. He performs it at a small concert. People enjoy it. The song spreads. A few years later, Eli travels back in time to visit his younger self. He wants to give advice and encouragement. During the meeting, he hums the melody that once came to him in sleep. The younger Eli likes it and writes it into his notebook. He will later dream a version of it because the tune already sits in his mind. The music exists because he heard it. He heard it because it exists. No one wrote it first. The melody has a history without a starting moment. This kind of loop challenges our sense of creation. We look for the first reflection, the first spark, the first hand that shaped something. But the loop hides that step. It shows an event that sustains itself through time, like a ring that never breaks. Consider a piece of technology. A scientist named Mara discovers a device left behind in a lab. It shows advanced design and materials she has never seen. She studies it and learns the principles behind it. She uses that knowledge to build new machines. Her work changes how the world uses energy. Years later, she becomes the person who created the device she once found. She sends it back in time so that she can find it in the first place. The device has no original inventor. The idea does not grow. It only repeats. We might try to explain this by saying both versions, young and old, contributed something. But if we look closely, neither does. The song Eli shares has no original composer. The machine Mara finds has no first blueprint. The loop feeds on its own existence. These loops look like magic, but they follow a rule. Each piece of the story depends on another piece. Nothing sits outside the loop. The origin becomes unnecessary. The event reflects itself, a mirror with no first reflection. Imagine a book. A writer named Jonah receives a copy of a novel in the mail. It carries his name on the cover, but he has not written anything like it. He reads the pages. The story moves him. It feels personal. He cannot stop thinking about it. Inspired, he begins typing his own draft. The words flow because the structure is already in his mind. He publishes the book. After the book becomes well known, someone in the future mails a copy to his younger self. The circle closes. Who created the characters? Who decided the ending? Jonah believes he brought the book to life, but only because a future version already had. The future version only wrote it because Jonah once received it. The book never enters the world through creation. It enters through repetition. Some scientists give this situation a name, a causal loop. Physics allows the idea in certain models involving closed time-like curves. Something can travel through time and influence its own origin. The past and future lean on each other so tightly that neither stands alone. Self-originating events raise another question. If something does not have a true beginning, does it hold value? A device that appears with no creator can still power a home. A song with no composer can still move a person to tears. A book without an author can still change a life. The usefulness remains, the impact remains, but the logic falls apart. The object becomes like a word spoken without thought, yet understood. We can explore a more emotional example. A woman named Claire receives a message from a future friend she has not met yet. The message says, "Do not give up on tomorrow." The words encourage her during a difficult year. Later in life, she meets the friend who sent the message. She thanks them. The friend looks confused. They do not remember writing it. Time goes on. One day, Claire becomes the friend who sends the message. She writes it because she remembers how much the message helped her. But the original motivation now comes from a loop. The comfort did not begin in kindness. It began in a future where Claire already received it. Even emotions can reflect without a first cause. Are these events mistakes? Are they glitches in logic? Or do they hint that our sense of time is incomplete? We want to track causes in a straight line. But if time bends, causes might not need to come first. A loop can hold meaning even without a beginning. Self-originating events tell us that some things may exist simply because they fit. The timeline supports them. They help maintain the loop. They do not need a first step any more than a circle needs a corner. They show that time can hide origins in a perfect reflection that starts nowhere and continues everywhere.
We often look at family as a chain. Each generation links to the one before. If a link breaks, no links can form after it. We rely on this structure because it makes the past easy to understand. Without your parents, you would not be here. Without your grandparents,
your parents would not be here. Simple cause leads to a simple effect. But time travel shakes this idea. It allows someone to step back into the years before they were born. If they change one moment, the chain behind their birth may break. If that happens, the person who caused the change should not exist. The conflict between cause and existence creates a paradox. Imagine a woman named Lena. She grows up hearing stories about her grandfather, a man who made harsh choices during his youth. Those choices hurt many people, and the effects linger in Lena's family. She wants to fix those old mistakes. When she becomes a researcher, she creates a device that can carry her back to a day when her grandfather stood at a crossroads in his life. She arrives, watches the younger version of him, and tries to help him decide differently. She speaks with him. She shows him the pain his future path will cause. He listens. He takes a new path. Lena returns home expecting a better world. Instead, she finds out that her mother was never born. Her grandfather's new life changed his relationships. He met a different partner. He raised different children. Lena's branch of the family tree no longer exists. Yet she stands there, alive, holding memories from a world that no longer happened. Her existence becomes an error placed in a new timeline. The cause of her life was erased. The effect remains. She is both present and impossible. This is the core of the grandfather paradox. Preventing your ancestor's life path can remove your own, but if you do not exist, you cannot travel back to change anything. The paradox pushes the timeline into a contradiction it cannot resolve. We can imagine a smaller change that still breaks the chain. A traveler returns to hide a letter that once brought two people together. Without that letter, they never meet. Their marriage never begins. The traveler's parent never arrives in the world. The traveler becomes the last member of a branch, now cut away. Each action aimed at helping the family instead erases the family line that produced the helper. Sometimes the change is not even intentional. A traveler might bump into an ancestor by accident. That delay could mean they miss a meeting. The missed meeting could change a life, and that change could remove a birth years later. The timeline responds to tiny shifts in large ways. When the chain breaks, different outcomes can follow. One idea is that the universe corrects itself. The timeline might simply refuse to allow actions that lead to contradiction. Lena's grandfather may misunderstand her advice. He may ignore it. Her mission may fail every time she tries, not because of fate, but because the timeline cannot support the result she wants. Another idea allows success with consequences. The traveler keeps living, but no longer belongs to the world that holds them. They walk among people who should be close family, but those people see only a stranger. The traveler keeps their memories, yet the world remembers a history without them. They become a loose thread outside the pattern. There is a third possibility. The timeline splits. One branch continues unchanged. The other forms from the new choice. The traveler remains in the new branch or jumps back to the old one. In that case, the paradox turns into separation. The original world holds the traveler's origin. The new world holds a version of history where the traveler's lineage ends. Both branches exist, but only one contains the traveler's place in the story. Each possibility leads to a different kind of loss. In one, the traveler loses the power to change anything. In another, the traveler loses their connection to their family. In the last, the traveler loses access to the world that remembers them. Paradox asks a question about identity. If your parents never meet, are you still you? If your family line changes direction, where do you fit? We define ourselves by where we come from. But if time travel scrambles origins, the answer becomes unclear. We also discover how much history rests on chance. One conversation leading to a marriage, one move to a new town, one moment of trust. The traveler sees the fragile roots that feed their existence. The past did not guarantee them. It allowed them. That allowance can disappear with a single decision. A lineage looks strong when we only move forward. When we move backward, it can collapse with surprising speed. A traveler does not need to harm anyone to erase generations. They only need to shift one person's path by a small degree at the right moment. We stand here because countless choices lined up in a precise order. The shadow behind us reaches farther than we notice. Grandfather's shadow stretches over every moment of our being. If someone steps into that shadow and changes how it falls, the light that once shaped us may disappear.
Most stories begin somewhere. We expect a first moment that sets everything in motion. A match lights before the fire burns. A seed falls before a tree grows. We build our understanding of time around this simple structure. The past causes the present, and the present leads into the future. But if time contains loops, the idea of a first moment breaks down. Instead of a straight line, we get a circle. Instead of a beginning, we get a loop that always existed. Imagine a researcher named Ori. She works in a quiet lab at night, searching for a theory that explains strange readings in her experiments. Every test shows energy patterns that do not match her equations. She writes and erases until she feels stuck. Then a stranger arrives. He gives her a notebook filled with solutions, diagrams, and formulas she has never seen. He says only, "This will matter," and leaves. Those notes change everything. Ori publishes a theory that advances time physics. Years later, she becomes the stranger. She travels back to her younger self and hands over the notebook. The knowledge has no clear origin. It did not come from discovery. It arrived because it already existed in the future. The loop sustains the ideas. The timeline offers no first spark. Ori's breakthrough starts and ends with itself. This situation creates what physicists call a closed time-like curve. Events depend on one another in a circle. The universe allows the loop because it remains consistent. Nothing violates the timeline, but nothing begins it either. Other loops feel more personal. Picture a man named Silas who carries a pocket watch. The watch means everything to him. His grandmother gave it to him when he was a child. She said it once belonged to a traveler who changed her life. Silas keeps it close through every challenge. When he grows old, he finds himself traveling through time by accident when his ship hits a storm in space. He lands decades earlier and meets a young woman struggling during a hard winter. He gives her the watch for comfort. That woman becomes his grandmother. The pocket watch has no maker. The gift has no first giver. The loop stands without an origin. If a loop continues forever, where do we place the cause? We can point to any moment inside it and say, "This happened because of what came next." The future explains the past. The past supports the future. But we never reach a point where we can say, "Here is where it all began." These loops force us to ask what beginnings even mean. We assume every effect must have a cause that comes before it.
Yet in a loop, the cause can follow the effect. The effect can make the cause necessary. Logic works differently when time curves. Let's explore another case. A researcher builds a machine that protects cities from storms. She presents the design to a council. They praise her invention and ask how she thought of it. She says she found the plans stored in an old archive. She does not know who designed it. After years of use, her machine becomes standard technology. Then a time experiment goes wrong, and she is sent back to the moment the archive first formed. She sees an empty folder waiting for data. Without thinking, she uploads the plans. She believes the information must stay recorded so the machine can exist. The technology appears because it appeared. Its history does not include a first version. The loop keeps the idea alive. We can picture timelines like sheets of paper. Some fold into clean lines, others crumple. Loops twist the paper into rings. They remove the need for edges. Time still moves, but it no longer points in only one direction. These loops raise questions about identity as well. If someone receives advice from their future self, who deserves credit for growth? If a hero acts because they saw themselves succeed later, what inspired the first act? When success loops through time, motivation becomes both the seed and the fruit. Some might feel uneasy because loops remove the comfort of progress. We like to track development, learning, failure, improvement, change. A loop suggests that change might be an illusion. The timeline maintains itself, and we follow its shape. Others find the idea hopeful. If time does not require beginnings, then nothing must start perfect. Contribution keeps meaning even if the source hides. The loop protects knowledge. It preserves events that matter. There are theories that suggest the universe might choose the timeline that fits best. If a loop keeps events consistent, the universe may allow it. If a beginning would create conflict, the universe might prefer a circle. Instead of asking where everything started, we could ask why this loop, this version of time, holds together while others do not. Eternal loops show that time may not obey our desire for order. We expect a first cause, but time might not need one. Time might refuse to start.
We accept that every event needs a cause. A glass falls because someone knocks it over. A door opens because someone turns the knob. We build our sense of the world around this rule, but time travel challenges it. If someone can move into the past, a cause might follow its effect instead of leading it. An action might happen only because its own outcome demands it. Logic tries to stop this from happening, but time does not always follow logic. Picture a detective named Alina. She investigates a case involving a single strange object, a bullet lodged in a brick wall. Forensic tests show no gun fired it. No residue sits on the bricks. No casing lies nearby. Security cameras show no one holding a weapon, and no loud sound rings out that night. Yet the bullet sits there. It looks ordinary. It causes real damage. It simply lacks a beginning. The case grows stranger when Alina gets access to a time device as part of the investigation. She decides to travel back a few minutes before the bullet appeared. She waits near the wall. A version of herself from the future steps into view. She holds a gun. She fires. The bullet hits the brick. Then she disappears into the machine again. Later, that future version of Alina becomes the woman with the gun who steps into the past. She fires the bullet that she once found. The bullet fires itself because the loop demands that moment. The effect creates the cause. This kind of situation is a closed loop. The bullet exists because it exists later. It appears because someone must fire it, and that someone fires it only because they once found it. The loop remains stable even without a first shot. We rarely think of causes coming second. Yet, time travel creates events that depend on their own outcomes. The bullet forces us to see a timeline that circles back on itself. It has no first motion. It simply continues. Consider another case. A scientist named Ren owns a tool that can disable harmful machines. The tool looks advanced and strange. It saves people during a crisis. When Ren studies it later, he cannot trace the design to any engineer. There is no patent and no record. Years pass, and he finally learns how to build a device like it. He travels back to deliver the tool to his younger self. The technology becomes real only because it already saved the day. It functions even though its origin is missing. The same structure appears in human behavior. Imagine a person who receives a warning from their future self. The warning protects them from danger. That protection allows them to survive long enough to send the warning. The future act keeps the past act alive. The loop does not break. The loop holds itself together. These loops raise a question about responsibility. If Alina fires the gun only because she once saw the bullet in the wall, did she choose to fire it? Or did the bullet make her pull the trigger? The timeline needs her action, so she performs it. The cause seems like a command from the future instead of a decision. This becomes even more unsettling when the outcome is harmful. Imagine someone finds a broken machine that starts a disaster. They travel back to stop it from forming. In the process, they bump into a piece of equipment and break it. That break starts the disaster they wanted to prevent. They become the cause of the effect that drove them to act. The loop becomes self-contained tragedy. The bullet fires itself. The harm exists without a clear villain. Sometimes the loop protects life instead of threatening it. A firefighter receives an emergency alert from an unknown source. He runs to the scene and saves a child. Years later, he becomes a dispatcher. He hears a situation that sounds familiar. He sends the alert to his younger self. The rescue depends on a loop that prevents loss instead of causing it. Still, if we search for the reason the alert exists, we find only the moment when the rescue succeeded. People tend to ask, where did the information begin? Where did the energy for the shot come from? Who made the first move? But the loop denies a first move. It does not violate physics inside the circle. Energy and information transfer in a closed path. The loop acts like an object that floats without ever being placed in the water. It exists because the timeline supports the circle. Stories like these make time feel like a maze instead of a line. They show that an event can happen because the universe insists it must, not because someone started it. The cause needs the effect. The effect needs the cause. They hold each other upright. When we imagine bullets, we think of force, direction, and action starting from a trigger. A bullet that fires itself needs none of that. It needs only a loop strong enough to replace the beginning with repetition. We like to believe that if we return to the past, we can make a difference. We think one clear choice can break a cycle. If a mistake shaped our lives, we imagine stepping back and fixing it. We picture a new future that rewards our effort. But some stories of time travel take another direction. They show that trying to change the past might only guarantee the future we hoped to avoid. The timeline reacts like a spring. Push it, and it pushes back. The attempt becomes the cause of the very thing we tried to erase. Fate does not loosen, it tightens. Imagine a man named Elias who remembers losing a friend during a storm. The moment haunts him. He studies time until he builds a device that can take him back to that night. He arrives just as the storm hits. He finds his friend near a broken bridge, yelling for help. Elias rushes forward to pull him away from the edge. In the struggle, Elias slips. He grabs his friend's jacket to steady himself. The jacket tears. The friend loses balance and falls. Elias watches the same tragedy happen again, and now he knows he caused it. His attempt to change the past locks the event in place. Instead of saving a life, he becomes the reason it ended. The past stays unchanged, but Elias returns carrying guilt he did not have before. Some call this a self-consistent timeline. The universe might allow time travel, but only if the actions taken support the history we already know. If you try to remove a key event, the event finds another way to happen. If a warning comes too early, the person might ignore it. If someone tries to destroy a machine before it causes harm, someone else might repair it. Every prevention becomes the push that keeps the original outcome alive. Think of a woman named Priya, who knows her hometown will burn in a large fire. She wants to stop it. She travels back and warns the local fire department. They take her seriously. They remove unsafe materials from the buildings. They check wiring. Everything looks safe. But the caution blinds them to another risk. A spark from a different source starts the fire instead. It spreads even faster because the firefighters assumed the danger was under control. Priya's warning reshapes the event, but does not erase it. The fire still comes, just from another direction. Her effort feeds the result she feared. Fate responds with feedback. This kind of loop can also shape personal identity. A traveler might return to tell their younger self not to trust a certain person. The younger version hears the warning, but the warning sparks curiosity. They approach that person to find out what the future self meant. The connection forms because of the warning. The problem grows because someone tried to prevent it. Some timelines seem to lean towards certain outcomes. If a person tries to move away from a fixed event, the world pulls them back like a magnet. The attempt becomes part of the path. The struggle becomes the reason the history stays intact. Consider a political example. A leader makes a law that leads to years of hardship. A traveler wants to stop that law from being written. They go back and try to dissuade the leader from entering politics. The leader laughs off the looning, but becomes obsessed with the idea someone fears his rise. He works harder to gain power. The warning itself fuels his ambition. The law passes with more force than before. The traveler does not weaken fate. The traveler strengthens it. Even accidents can show this. A scientist named Marta knows her lab will explode during a test. She rushes back to stop the experiment. She reaches for the switch, but bumps into a shelf. A tool falls. Sparks fly. The explosion happens earlier. Her attempt changes the details, but not the outcome. The result remains anchored in time. These stories raise a question about freedom. If every effort to change a moment only secures it, what role does choice play? It seems people still make decisions. They still act with purpose, but the timeline uses those actions to guide events back to where they must go. A person fighting fate may feel agency, but they might only follow the track that leads to the same ending. There's another way to see it. Some outcomes are not fixed by a single cause. They grow from many influences. A traveler might remove one cause, but another rises.
A different person gives the same speech. A different spark starts the same fire. A different fall breaks the same heart. The timeline keeps moving toward its conclusion through whatever path it finds available. Fate's feedback does not say change is impossible. It says some events resist change because they hold the timeline together. Pull on the thread, and the rest of the fabric adjusts to protect the pattern. The paradox does not come from mistakes. It comes from the structure of time itself. When someone tries to stop a moment they remember, they become part of the reason that moment still exists. The past does not break, it flexes. And each attempt to bend it only brings it back to shape.
We picture time as something that remembers everything. Each action leaves a trace. Each choice becomes part of history. We assume the past keeps perfect records, even if we do not. But when we imagine time travel, we must consider another possibility. Changing the past might erase those traces. The world may adjust itself so cleanly that no one sees what was altered. The footprints left behind disappear into smooth ground. The traveler knows what changed, but the rest of the world continues as if the change never happened. Imagine a traveler named Mira. She learns that a close friend will face a hardship in the future. She cannot accept this outcome. She builds a device that carries her back 10 years to a turning point in her friend's life. She speaks with the younger version of him, offers advice, and nudges him onto a different path. The dangerous situation never happens. When she returns to her own time, she expects to see gratitude or a new memory shared between them. Instead, she finds a world where nothing seems unusual. Her friend lives comfortably, unaware of any danger he once faced. He does not remember Mira visiting him in the past. The moment she changed fades from his history. He thanks no one. He owes nothing. He believes his life always unfolded this way. Mira sees the result. She does not see the struggle that used to shape him. The world erased both the threat and the interference. The consequences survive. The cause disappears. The same logic can work against a traveler. Suppose someone goes back to prevent a small accident. A dropped plate in a kitchen once led to a chain of events that introduced two people. Those two people fell in love and raised a family. If the plate never breaks, the meeting never happens. The family never forms. The world grows around the new gap. No memory remains of what once existed because the family that would remember never arrives. The only person who knows the difference is the traveler. They walk through a present that pretends nothing changed. They feel the absence, yet the world refuses to acknowledge it. Time seems to prefer stability. When a traveler pushes, time smooths the surface behind them. Like a broom sweeping away footprints in sand, history hides the marks left by interference. It repairs contradictions in silence. This leads to a curious kind of loneliness. The traveler becomes the only witness of a past that no longer matches the world. They may feel grief over moments that now lack evidence. They may carry memories of people who have not been born, or relationships that ended before they began. Think about someone named Daniel. He once lost his job because a crucial document was misplaced. That loss changed his entire life. Years later, he learns that document disappeared due to a small mistake. He returns to stop the mistake from happening. He slips the document back where it belongs. When he returns to the present, he finds a new version of his career. He holds a respectable title. People treat him like a leader, yet no one recalls the trouble he once faced. The coworkers who supported him through hardship do not share that bond now. He remembers the lessons from struggle,
the world remembers none of it. His growth exists from a past that the world erased. Sometimes the change produces results that seem strange but harmless. A familiar street may look slightly different. A landmark may have a new name. A person may swear they remember a shop that no one else recalls. These mismatches are soft clues that time has repaired something. Other times, the effects cut deeper. A traveler might discover that someone they love now lives far away or never met them. They might see a photograph where one face has changed. They might hear their own name spoken like it belongs to a stranger. They feel replaced in the story they once owned. There is a rule of time known as the correction principle. It suggests that timelines prefer coherence. If something changes the past, the present shifts enough to prevent contradictions. The timeline removes stray outcomes that do not fit. It patches memory. It rewrites records. It wears the new shape as if it always existed. The correction does not ask permission. It does not tell anyone what it fixed. Even knowledge can disappear. A scientist may discover a method from a future visitor. Then time adjusts to hide the visitor's influence. The notes rewrite themselves. The memories fade. The discovery remains, but its story changes. The world acts as if the idea arose from nowhere. This raises a question about credit. If the past erases the hand that shaped it, who deserves recognition? If a mistake never occurs, who learns from preventing it? The traveler stands with answers others cannot verify. They see what time deletes. Erased footprints protect the timeline from confusion. They make history look smooth and unbroken. They hide the chaos caused by travel. They make interference feel clean. But the traveler knows that smooth ground does not mean untouched. Time hides the marks, but the path remains altered, quietly, confidently, and without explanation.
We trust messages because they come from a sender who lived through the moment that shaped the words. A letter has a date. A text has a timestamp. We see communication as a record of someone's experience. But time travel challenges that trust. A message might come from a future that later disappears. The person who wrote it might never reach the moment they describe. Their warnings or promises might guide events so well that their own timeline never forms. The letter remains. The future behind it does not. Imagine a woman named Nia who wakes up to find an envelope on her desk. It carries her name. The stamp looks recent. The handwriting looks familiar, her own. Inside, the letter tells her to avoid a certain meeting later that afternoon. The message explains that the meeting leads to a partnership that ends in betrayal. Nia feels confused, but follows the instruction. She skips the meeting. The betrayal never happens. She continues with her life in peace. A week later, she tries to remember why she avoided the meeting. She checks her desk. The letter is gone. No one recalls seeing it. The future that created the message vanished when she changed course. Yet she remembers receiving guidance. The message saved her, but the timeline erased its source. The sent letter becomes a ghost, proof of a future that corrected itself. We can imagine a stronger urgency. A man named Rafi learns that his sister will face an accident years from now. He builds a device that sends messages through time. He writes a short warning and transmits it to the day before the accident. The sister reads it and avoids the danger. The accident never happens. Rafi feels relief, but his device depended on the research he began after the accident. Without the tragedy driving him, he never studies time travel. Without his work, there is no device to send the warning. The timeline adjusts. The device becomes a memory only Rafi holds. The warning survives only as a change in his sister's choices. He sent a message from a future that erased the reason for his message. Some stories involve lighter moments. A child finds a postcard signed by their future self. It hints at a talent the child does not know they will have. The suggestion shapes their interests. They grow into that talent as if guided, but when they reach the age written on the postcard, they never send it. They forget about the message or decide not to write. The postcard remains a seed that came from a branch now cut away. These loops create confusion because we expect messages to have a clear origin. We ask who wrote the letter, who sent it, who earned the knowledge printed on the page. Time travel sometimes removes those answers. The message helps create a version of life where its own origin no longer fits. The paradox feels strongest when the letter carries deep emotion. Imagine someone receives a goodbye note from a partner who disappears in the future. The note explains heartache and distance. The reader decides to listen. They address the problems early. They talk. They build trust. The relationship grows stronger instead of ending. When the future arrives, there is no moment when the partner needs to say goodbye. They never write the note that once saved them, yet the effect remains. The love stays alive because of a message that now belongs to a future that never happened. A letter like this raises questions about fate. Did the message create the future or prevent it? If a warning solves a problem before it forms, does the problem exist at all? We often judge events by their consequences, but when a message in time removes the consequence, we lose our ability to judge the event. Time may respond by hiding the contradiction. The sender's name might fade, the date might smudge, the memory might weaken. The reader remembers enough to act, but not enough to explain why. It becomes just a feeling, a nudge from nowhere. The timeline smooths itself. The message becomes part of instinct. Consider a more complex case. A city receives evacuation orders. The warning arrives from an unknown source. People leave. The disaster never affects the city. When they return, they question the alert. Officials check records and find nothing. The broadcast system shows no activity, yet thousands recall leaving. Their memories come from a future with destruction, but the present holds safety. The city moves on, protected by a decision triggered by a warning that now lacks history. People feel gratitude and confusion. They wonder how they knew what to do. The world keeps no trace of the message that changed it. These situations show how time can protect itself from contradiction. If a message removes the event that inspired it, the timeline adjusts to erase the source. The result stays. The cause fades. It becomes a letter sent from a future that never was, delivered only because it succeeded. We expect time to move in one direction. We count seconds and trust that the next moment follows the one before it. We picture particles following tidy paths from past to present to future. But in quantum physics, the rules loosen. Tiny objects sometimes behave like they do not care about the sequence that keeps our world structured. They can act as if the future influences the past. They can reach into outcomes that have not formed. These particles look like marauders moving through time without concern for order. Imagine a simple experiment. A particle travels toward a barrier with two narrow openings. If we fire one particle at a time, each should pick a single path. Instead, the particle behaves like it goes through both openings at once. It only chooses a final result when someone observes it. Some interpretations say the particle holds every path in potential, but another way to see it is that future measurement determines what the particle did in the past. Observation locks the timeline into a single version. Before the observer looks, the history remains unsettled. This raises a strange thought. If we wait to check until after the particle passes through the barrier, our choice of when to look changes the particle's earlier path. A decision made now seems to reach back and rewrite what happened moments before. Quantum behavior bends the arrow of time. It does not wait for cause to stand ahead of effect. Some physicists proposed an idea called the delayed choice experiment. It suggests that the act of measuring a particle changes not only its current state, but how it traveled before. The result looks like the future deciding what the past must have been. That feels impossible, yet the math supports the behavior. Time appears flexible. The sequence we trust becomes a choice, not a rule. These particles do not break time in dramatic ways. They do not rewrite history or erase people from photographs. Their actions play out at tiny scales, but their attitude toward order challenges our view of what time means. If the building blocks of the universe ignore chronology, maybe time's direction is not as strict as we think. Consider another example: entangled particles. When two particles become entangled, a measurement on one reveals information about the other instantly, no matter the distance between them. It seems like a signal jumps faster than light. It seems like one particle reacts to knowledge gained later. Some explanations avoid faster than light ideas by saying information never travels. Instead, the universe already knows the outcome. The measurement exposes what was fixed all along, but there remains a sense that cause and effect do not stand in a straight line. The entangled partner acts without waiting for a clear cause to reach it. This can look like a kind of planning. The particles behave as if they already know what must happen. The future instruction slips into the past without an obvious messenger. The moment of action and the moment of cause appear linked outside normal time. Imagine a story scaled up from particles to events. A scientist named Wren arranges a test using particles that travel through a chamber. Sensors record their behavior. The measurement device is programmed to switch modes at the last possible second. Wren flips the switch after the particle passes a critical point. When she checks the results, the data shows that the particle acted earlier as if it knew the switch setting. It behaved based on a trigger that came later. Wren tries again. The pattern repeats. She begins to see the particles as travelers who ignore the checkpoint that orders past and future. They operate with a different rule set: consistency first, then time. These quantum tricks invite us to consider time not as a river, but as a network of connections. Each event supports another, regardless of order. A cause may lie behind or ahead of the effect. The loop closes itself wherever it needs support. Chronology serves the story. It does not define it. Some theories suggest that time might not flow the way we experience it. Our brains build the feeling of movement from one moment to the next. But at the smallest scales, everything might exist as one web of linked states. When we look at the web, we slice it into a timeline. The slice creates the illusion of a single direction. We can explore a more personal example. Imagine a particle inside a human brain. Its behavior might depend on future events that the person has not lived yet. If that particle influences a neuron, and that neuron shapes a choice, then the choice could reflect a guidance from a moment that hasn't happened. It sounds like imagination gone wild,
but the same math that applies to electrons applies everywhere. If future-driven quantum effects play even a tiny role in thought, then free will and fate might blend. Decisions might form partly from outcomes that already exist in the future. Another idea says that time symmetry rules the quantum world. If you flip the direction of time in the equations, the math still makes sense. In backward time, particles could behave just as well as in forward time. Our concern over order may come from living in a world large enough that heat spreads, objects break, and entropy grows. At our scale, time feels like a one-way rulebook. At the quantum scale, time looks like an unfinished suggestion. Some scientists argue that there is no violation at all. They say the confusion comes from trying to describe quantum events using everyday language. In their view, nothing travels backward. Nothing changes the past. Instead, the timeline forms a consistent whole. What looks like retroactive influence is simply the universe showing all moments at once. But that idea is just as unsettling. It means the future already sits in place, waiting for us to notice. Quantum particles behave like marauders because they do not respect the lines we draw. They slip across the borders we try to enforce. They make choices that depend on places they have not reached. They create results that decide the cause. They live in a world where chronology is only one option. We like to believe we can change the past if given the chance. We picture a time traveler stepping into a crucial moment and pushing history onto a better path. We imagine warnings sent across years, small interventions, and second chances. But many stories of time travel suggest the opposite. They show a world that absorbs every attempt to break free. The timeline bends, but does not snap. It finds a new route that leads back to the same destination. Destiny behaves like something that adjusts itself. It protects certain outcomes even when we try to remove the cause. Picture a woman named Mara who knows that a famous museum will burn in a fire. She lived through the aftermath and watched pieces of history disappear. When she invents a time device decades later, she chooses to go back to the week before the fire. She inspects the wiring and warns the staff about the danger. They take action. They replace faulty equipment. They increase safety checks. Mara returns to her time with hope. But she soon discovers a different chain of events. A new exhibit in that same museum requires strong lighting. One of the lights overheats. It starts the fire anyway. The date changes. The path changes. The outcome stays. Destiny finds a workaround. We can imagine another attempt. A father learns that a mistake he made long ago pushed his child away. He regrets it every day. He goes back to fix that moment. He speaks carefully. He treats the child with more patience. But the change brings a different pressure. He becomes overprotective. His child grows frustrated and pulls away for a new reason. The relationship breaks in a similar shape, only from the opposite side. The result waits for its chance. Some call this the self-consistency principle. It says that actions taken by a traveler must fit the timeline they came from. If someone remembers a fire, and any attempt to stop that fire becomes part of why it happens. If someone regrets a broken relationship, their regret drives behavior that keeps the break intact. Destiny behaves like a computer program that fixes errors by rewriting data. It will not allow a contradiction to survive. Picture a scientist named Desmond who knows that a virus outbreak will hurt his city. He returns to the time before the outbreak to warn health officials. They act quickly and develop a vaccine. People stay safe. Desmond returns to his present ready to celebrate success. But he hears that a different illness rose instead, one that strikes because the attention moved away from it during the prevention effort. The timeline plugs one leak by opening another. The threat shifts, but does not disappear. This approach to time might sound harsh, but it does not rely on cruel intention. It relies on balance. If one path toward a major event becomes blocked, another path forms. A timeline that remembers a certain outcome will keep finding the shape it knows. Sometimes the workaround feels subtle. A person avoids a dangerous street because a traveler warned them. They choose a new path. The accident that once defined their life now waits on another corner. The details change, but the moment arrives anyway. Even small events can resist change. A writer learns that a rare book she once found inspired her whole career. She fears losing that spark if she changes anything. She returns to protect the book's author from early failure. The author becomes successful earlier, but now chooses different topics. The book never gets written. The writer grows up uninspired. She never becomes a writer. The timeline keeps its grip through silence. The success she tried to create removes the trigger that shaped her future. Destiny works like a puzzle that rearranges itself. Take out one piece and another slides into the empty space. The full picture remains. Some people imagine destiny as a force that wants something. But the idea does not require desire. It only requires structure. When events depend on each other, removing one changes the others. A timeline is not a list of moments. It is a network. Pull one strand and the rest tighten. We can explore the emotional side. A son goes back to stop the argument that ended his parents' marriage. He thinks one calm conversation can hold the family together. He changes the scene. They do not fight. They stay together that night. But years later, frustration builds in other places. The separation arrives anyway, timed differently but shaped the same. The son returns to his present and finds no history of divorce and no memory of unity. He lives in a version of the world where love failed on a different page. He tried to escape the ending he remembered. The timeline found another route. This does not mean people lack choice. It means some outcomes anchor a story. The traveler still acts freely. They still care. But their care becomes part of a bigger design. Their effort supports the end point rather than replacing it. We can test another idea. A traveler tries many times to alter a key event. Each attempt shifts the details. New people become involved. New circumstances form. Yet the event stays in place. The traveler begins to suspect that change is not only hard, it might be unwelcome. The world seems to correct them with gentle but firm guidance. The escape-proof timeline delivers a calm lesson. It suggests that not every moment can be rewritten. It shows that history behaves like a path worn into the ground. The land around it may shift, but the path remains clear. And if someone tries to step off it, the ground rolls back under their feet. Every deviation becomes a push toward the same point. Every attempt to prevent the ending becomes part of how it happens. Destiny does not need force to win. It only needs time.
Family trees look stable when we read them from the present backward. We trace names, we follow dates. We accept that each person depends on the ones who came before. If one ancestor disappears, the line collapses. That is how history seems to work: solid, clear, unchanging. But when time travel enters the story, that stability begins to wobble. An ancestor might end up in a state where they are both alive and not alive. A single person becomes the key to a contradiction. Their existence determines yours, yet your actions might remove theirs. They turn into Schrödinger's ancestor, stuck between being real and being erased. Imagine a man named Adrian. He grows up with strong ties to his grandfather, a man who taught him kindness and patience. Late in life, Adrian learns that his grandfather once faced a terrible choice. That choice ended a friendship and led to years of guilt. Adrian wants to help. He builds a time device and goes back to the moment his grandfather made that decision. He arrives unnoticed and gives a quiet warning: do not walk away. The younger grandfather listens. He chooses differently. He keeps his friend. He avoids the pain that shaped the stories Adrian remembers. Adrian returns to the present expecting joy. Instead, he finds confusion. His grandfather's house stands full of different memories. Photos show a man who traveled the world. Letters show hobbies and friendships Adrian never knew. Adrian looks for familiar details but sees only a stranger in a familiar face. His grandfather exists, but not in the way that led to Adrian's own life. The version of the grandfather who became his elder no longer formed. Adrian's mother met someone else. Adrian should not exist, yet there he stands, alive, with proof inside his own body that his ancestor once lived a different life. He becomes a contradiction in motion. His grandfather exists in one version of history and does not exist in another. Adrian's own origin becomes foggy. The timeline struggles to decide which version is true. This creates a kind of quantum problem at the scale of family. In quantum physics, a particle can exist in multiple states at once until someone measures it. Schrödinger used a cat to explain the strangeness. The cat inside the box is both alive and dead until the box is opened. Here, the ancestor becomes the cat. They are both the person who created the traveler and the person who did not. Consider a different story. A woman named Talia learns she carries a rare genetic trait that causes illness later in life. She discovers that this trait came from a great-grandmother she never met. Time travel technology gives her a chance to stop the trait from passing on. She visits the past and tips the balance of one crucial decision. Her great-grandmother chooses not to have children. The trait disappears from the family line. Generations shift. New branches grow. Talia returns home and feels her body changing. Her illness fades, but her past begins to slip away. Her parents look at her with faces that hold no recognition. The family history books do not show her name. The home she once lived in belongs to someone else. She exists, but her place in the line vanished. The woman who once brought her into existence never became a mother. If she erases her ancestor's path, does she remove her own presence in the world? Or does she remain as a leftover from a history that should not exist anymore? This tension makes the paradox uncomfortable. We rely on family to define ourselves. We inherit stories, physical traits,
and even values. Without those links, who are we? Without that ancestor, what does it mean that we breathe at all? Imagine a more subtle case. A time traveler returns to meet an ancestor, not to change them, but simply to watch. They hide behind a tree and observe. They plan to stay quiet and leave no trace. But the ancestor hears a sound, turns, and sees a shadow moving. Fear drives them to stay indoors that night instead of meeting someone. That meeting was once the start of a family line. Now, it does not happen. The time traveler tried to be careful, but even silence can shift history. The ancestor now lives a different life. That slight change might stop a birth decades later. The traveler's presence, though gentle, alters the timeline. They become both a part of the family and the reason the family ends. Time might respond by holding two truths at once. In one version, the ancestor lives, meets the right person, and the lineage continues. In the new version, the ancestor follows a different path, and the lineage ends. The traveler remembers the first. The world stands on the second. One branch supports their life, the other removes it. The ancestor becomes Schrödinger's ancestor, alive in memory, undone in record. We can stretch the idea even further. Suppose a traveler notices signs that their ancestor might soon die before having children. The traveler intervenes. They save the ancestor from danger. That survival allows the family line to continue. Many years later, the traveler is born. But if the traveler never existed, no one would save the ancestor. The ancestor would die. The traveler's rescue and their own birth depend on each other. The ancestor's fate becomes uncertain, simultaneously saved and lost, until the timeline chooses a version that can exist without contradiction. Some theories say time always chooses that consistent version. The event that allows the traveler to be born must stay intact. The rescue always happens. The ancestor always survives. The contradiction ends before it forms. This keeps family lines stable. But other views whisper that more than one version might exist at once. One where the ancestor lives, one where they do not. The traveler might notice the edges flicker, the past shifting between two shapes that cannot both hold. They feel the pull of two identities, the person who belongs and the person who never should have existed. In these paradoxes, the family tree becomes uncertain. Roots vanish, branches regrow, leaves hang without trunks. Schrödinger's ancestor stands at the heart of the confusion. They might have lived a long life that leads to you. They might have chosen a different path that wipes you away. Both stories make sense. Both stories need you to witness them. You exist because they lived. You exist even if they did not. You carry their history in one version of time, while time erases them in another.
Most people picture history as something stable. We think every moment rests solidly on the one before it. We feel safe believing the past will stay the past, but time does not always hold its shape. If a single event changes, countless other moments may shift with it. A small adjustment can shake the structure of everything that follows. The way one block removed from a Jenga tower can make the whole stack sway. Imagine someone named Jordan. In his childhood, he meets a teacher who encourages him to write. That single conversation opens a path. He writes short stories in high school. He studies literature in college. His books later help a friend through grief. Years after that, the friend becomes a counselor and guides others through their own struggles. One moment in a classroom shapes a chain of lives. Now picture a time traveler who decides to help Jordan with something unrelated. The traveler goes back to prevent Jordan from getting sick one winter. The change looks harmless. Jordan stays healthy, but he spends his free time playing outside instead of staying indoors with a book. He never meets the teacher who notices his stories because he finishes his assignments late. He never becomes a writer. His friend never hears a story that offers comfort. The counselor who once helped many never exists. One small block pulled out changes the shape of far more than the traveler intended. This is what makes time fragile. The big turning points are easy to see. The hidden supports, the ones we overlook, often hold most of the weight. Even accidental changes can create large ripples. A traveler might drop a coin while walking in the past. A stranger picks it up, leaves a shop earlier than planned, and catches a bus that breaks down on a different street. That delay shifts their job interview. That shift alters a hiring choice. That choice changes which product a company creates. A new invention appears years later, or fails to appear. The traveler never sees the tower wobble, but the world changes anyway. Some timelines react like self-balancing systems. If the block pulled out supports a major event, the timeline may nudge things back into place. A breakup that once happened on a stormy night may now happen during a quiet conversation. The location changes, but the ending stays. A career shift delayed by one change might accelerate because of another. The wobble settles, and the tower stays upright. The timeline seems to prefer certain results, even if the path shifts. Other times, the wobble grows. A traveler thinks they fixed a problem, but only removed the piece that kept the damage contained. A delayed warning could allow a small threat to grow larger. A rescued company might block an innovation that would have replaced it. A saved life might change who leads a community later, with consequences no one can predict. The traveler believes they prevented harm and then watches new harm rise somewhere else. This effect shows up outside science fiction too. Historians and economists often note how small triggers lead to large impacts. A missed letter can change political decisions. A misheard word can start or stop a conflict. Real life behaves like a tower with many loose pieces. We rarely notice the tension until something shifts. Time travel makes us see these tensions clearly. It forces us to notice how every life depends on moments so small they vanish into routine. A spilled cup could lead someone to leave a cafe early. That early exit could help them avoid or meet someone important. The difference between staying 1 minute longer or shorter could shape a generation. Consider a traveler named Vera who wants to prevent her brother from making a painful choice. She returns to encourage him on a day he once felt alone. Her advice works. He avoids the decision she feared, but the confidence Vera gives him changes what he pursues later. He takes a job overseas. He never meets the partner who once helped him build a family. He never has the child Vera remembers. The pain she tried to erase is gone, but so is a life she treasured. Another problem appears when a traveler keeps adjusting the past to fix each new wobble. A second correction might cancel the first. A third correction might undo the second. Each fix introduces a new imbalance. The tower never rests. The traveler becomes trapped trying to stabilize a structure that only falls because they touched it. Some theories try to protect the tower by suggesting that every change creates a new version of it. The old one remains untouched. The traveler steps into a fresh stack, leaving the original world stable. But even that does not erase responsibility. The traveler still shapes a version of existence where people lose moments they once counted on. A good intention in one world becomes a loss in another. Timeline Jenga shows that stability depends on countless links we never notice. We stand on choices made long before we were born.
We depend on accidents that once seemed meaningless. We feel steady only because we do not see the tower move. If time travel were real, we might learn that every event matters in ways we cannot predict. A quiet moment can support a future none of us have imagined yet. We think we could pull one block and improve everything, but time reminds us that the tower stands because each piece holds something else in place, even when we do not see how.
We tell ourselves we choose our path. We make plans and think we shape the future. But time travel stories introduce a different idea. They suggest that the future may already sit in place, waiting for us to arrive. Any attempt to avoid it might simply deliver us to the very moment we fear. When the timeline refuses to shift, defiance becomes part of the reason the future happens. The trap does not tighten around us. We tighten it ourselves. Imagine a man named Aaron who learns that a fire will destroy his home next year. He hears the exact day and the exact hour. He refuses to accept it. He travels back in time by a few days so he can prevent the disaster. He checks the wiring. He stores water and tools near every door. He plans for every risk he knows. When the day arrives, he waits, prepared. A neighbor panics after smelling smoke from another house and runs to Aaron's door. Aaron rushes to help. He trips over the very tools he positioned for safety. The fall breaks a lantern. The fuel spills. The fire starts at the exact time he was warned about. Aaron becomes the cause. Without his intervention, the fire might never have begun. His effort and his fear are the forces that keep the event intact. He believes he is resisting fate, yet he is following instructions he never saw written. His actions feel like rebellion. They function like compliance. A similar situation can happen in smaller, quieter ways. A teenager named Rhea hears a prediction that she will one day lose a close friendship because of jealousy. She decides to protect the friendship with honesty and directness, but she becomes anxious over every little shift in attention. The friend feels watched and judged. They pull away. Rhea accuses them of abandoning her. The jealousy she tried to avoid emerges from her worry. The fate she resisted forms from her resistance. Predestination's trap relies on a simple structure. You hear what the future holds. You change your behavior. That new behavior becomes the necessary step toward the predicted future. The trap does not hide its edges. It uses your effort to keep shape. Time travel intensifies this tension. A traveler sees a news report about a disastrous failure in a complex system. They go back to prevent the mistake. Every improvement shifts the chain of events, but the improvement also directs a new error to appear somewhere else. The failure moves rather than disappears. The traveler returns and sees a different headline describing a disaster at the same hour. Their attempt completes the timeline. The timeline needs their attempt. Some stories show the trap as calm inevitability. A woman receives a letter from her future self, urging her not to take a job offer. She listens. She turns it down. Months later, another offer arrives from a linked company. She accepts. That new position shapes her future the same way the first offer would have. The letter gave her a sense of agency while keeping her on track. The warning did not save her from the job. It guided her to the correct version of it. This kind of loop gives a timeline a strange personality. It feels like a script where improvisation is welcome only if the ending stays the same.
The middle can change. The conclusion cannot. You can walk a different path through the maze, but every turn leads back to the finish. Predestination challenges how we think about intention. If Aaron had never heard about the fire, he would not have caused it. If Rhea never learned the prediction, she might have stayed calm. The warning becomes the spark that lights the feared outcome. The person receiving the message takes action because they want freedom. A timeline uses that action to remove freedom. The trap does not need to feel cruel. It can feel supportive. A student learns that they will become a doctor. They might try to rebel against expectations, picking a different major. But the new major leads them to volunteer during a crisis. They discover a gift for medical care. They choose a new route into medicine. The rebellion motivates the alignment. This raises a question about free will. If all our attempts to break the pattern depend on the pattern, do we ever steer the story? The person still makes decisions. They weigh options. They feel responsible. But each choice lands on the exact path required to keep the timeline whole. One explanation says the universe enforces consistency. A timeline must remain stable. The future cannot fracture into contradictions. Events that must happen will happen. If someone tries to move away from a fixed moment, the world bends their steps back into line. Another explanation takes the pressure away from destiny and places it on structure. Outcomes that involve many causes are hard to remove. If a result relies on a wide network of influences, changing one path only pushes the network to reroute itself. The timeline protects the outcome through complexity, not intention. Predestination's trap might feel unfair, but the trap gives us a clue about how time works. It suggests that the future is not waiting for us to write it. It is waiting for us to catch up. And when we push against it, we become the reason it stands. We usually think of reality as something that stretches outward. One moment leads to the next. One idea creates another. The world moves forward, building new events on top of old ones. But some ideas in time travel and physics suggest a different shape. They suggest a world that loops into itself. Instead of spreading outward, events feed back. Instead of expanding forever, the timeline folds. You end up walking on ground you already crossed, though the path still feels new. Imagine a traveler named Kale who discovers a way to step between timelines. He expects to find different worlds full of different choices. In one, he thinks he might learn what would have happened if he moved to another city. In another, he expects to see what changes if he chose a different career. Each timeline should stand apart like branches of a tree. But when he arrives, he sees something else. He meets people who already know his name. He finds clues that he has visited before, though he has no memory of it. Every world he enters folds back toward his own. No matter how far he travels, he ends up in a version of the same place. This kind of structure is recursive. A recursive pattern repeats inside itself. A loop does not reach outward, it folds inward. Events that seem separate end up being pieces of the same cycle. Kale cannot escape because every door leads to another version of the room he started in. We can picture this through a simple object, a book. A writer named Savina struggles with a story that refuses to move forward. Her characters circle the same problems. She tries new chapters, but each one loops back into the plot she thought she left behind. She grows frustrated and throws the draft away. Years later, she finds her own discarded pages, published as a novel by someone else. The book seems to write itself because the act of abandoning the story becomes part of finishing it. The ending returns to the start. A world like this hides its edges. You think you reach a boundary, but the boundary feeds into another section of the same world. The universe may behave like a fractal, where the smallest part contains the shape of the whole. You zoom in thinking you will find something new. Instead, you find a familiar pattern repeating. Consider a case where someone sees a prediction about their own future. They try to avoid it, so they act differently. Those new actions create conditions that lead to the predicted future anyway. Their world folds around the change. It does not break. The outcome remains because the timeline supports itself. The future that motivates the change becomes the result of the change. Recursion in time can work with information too. Picture an inventor named Rowan who receives blueprints for a device that seems far beyond current technology. She builds it because the blueprint shows a complete design. Years later, as an older scientist, she sends those same blueprints back in time so that her younger self can find them. The blueprint never comes from original thought. It only loops. The device exists, but its origin hides inside the loop that keeps it alive. In this kind of world, knowledge does not rely on discovery. It relies on repetition. The universe keeps the pattern by folding the origin into the result. Even relationships can take this shape. A man named Theo meets someone who changes his life for the better. She encourages him to become more open. He grows, and years later, he reaches out to help a stranger. That stranger is the same woman, but younger. He becomes the person she once needed, which allowed her to become the person he met. Their bond loops through time. The friendship exists because it already existed. Self-recursing reality can also show up in memory. A woman dreams of a place she has never visited. She travels there on impulse. When she arrives, she sees a landmark exactly like her dream. That dream might not have been prediction. It might have been a memory she had not lived yet. Her future experience folded into her past thoughts. The timeline keeps her dream and her arrival tied together so that one supports the other. These loops can make the world feel smaller. Every path seems to return home, but they can also make the world feel deeper. Meaning becomes less about change and more about recognition. You understand not because the world gives something new, but because you finally notice what was always there. Some theories say the universe might choose self-consistent outcomes because they require the least adjustment. Contradictions collapse into stable loops. The timeline prefers to sustain patterns rather than build endless variation. If that is true, then the future does not wait for us. It participates in our decisions. The past does not disappear. It follows us into tomorrow. A self-recursing world does not ignore choice. It absorbs choice. Each decision feeds the structure that keeps the loop intact. People still act with intention. They still feel responsible. But the outcome becomes part of a larger cycle that already knows its shape. A world that folds into itself can appear strange at first. It challenges the idea that progress must move forward in a straight line. But the loop remains stable. It holds the story together. Even when we believe we are breaking away from what came before, we might simply be completing a path that returns us to the center.
We often praise people who step forward and change history. We picture leaders, inventors, and fighters who turn danger into safety. But time travel adds a strange twist to this idea. A traveler might protect the world from a disaster before it forms. Their success might erase the chain of events that would lead to their own existence. They become a hero the world never remembers. Their victory removes their story from the record. The revolution they start proceeds without the person who lit the spark. Imagine someone named Kieran. He grows up in a city ruled by a dictator. People fear speaking out. Food runs low. Hope feels thin. Kieran sees his family suffer. He joins a resistance group. They steal information that shows when the regime collapsed in a past version of history. They find a clue about time travel hidden in old research. Kieran volunteers to go back. He arrives decades earlier. Before the dictatorship forms, he works in secret, planting ideas about fair government. He helps a local journalist uncover corruption at the first sign of abuse. People demand accountability early. The movement grows before fear spreads. Kieran prevents the rise of the dictator he once fought. He feels relief. He believes he saved his family and his city. But when he returns to the present, the world looks different. His family lives in comfort. Children play in clean streets. People speak their minds. Yet no one knows him. They never needed a resistance. The group he once joined does not exist. The revolution shaped a peaceful nation, and that peace erased the reason for Kieran to be born. He saved everyone, including the parents who never met in the same way. He stands alive because the machine protected him outside the timeline, but his place in the world is gone. He's a hero with no origin. This is the unborn revolution. The act of saving the world removes the person who did the saving. We can see a quieter version of this idea. A doctor learns about a disease that will spread in the future and kill many people, including her own child. She travels to the start of the outbreak and shares knowledge about treatment and prevention. She changes habits before the illness appears. The disease never spreads. Her child never gets sick because her child is never born in this new history. The conditions that once brought her and her partner together do not occur. Their paths drift. She returns to a world that does not need her cure, and a family that does not include her child. Her heart celebrates the victory and breaks in the same breath. These heroes gain something rare, the power to rewrite fate. The price is that fate writes them out of the story. Sometimes the effect is not immediate. A traveler might stop a war that once fueled their own quest for justice. Without the struggle, they never learn the skills needed for time travel. The peaceful timeline removes their training. Another version of them might still exist, calm, fulfilled, unaware of what almost happened. The version who fought for change becomes a ghost wandering a world that does not owe him thanks. The unborn revolution raises questions about the meaning of sacrifice. If no one remembers a hero, does the hero still matter? The answer depends on how you view value. People live because of their effort. Safety spreads because of their choices. Lives unfold free from the shadow that once hung over them. The effect stays strong, even if the cause disappears. There are versions of this paradox that do not involve war or global threats. A scientist might prevent a device from being invented because she knows it will cause harm. She stops the discovery early. Without the invention, a chain of decisions changes.
different careers form, different families grow. When she comes home, the world does not know the danger it avoided. She sees ordinary life. She knows she protected it, but the people she saved never understand they needed help. Some might call this unfair. A person gives everything and receives silence in return. But fairness plays no role in how time holds itself together. The timeline smooths out contradictions. It erases the footprints of interference, so the world feels natural and complete. The traveler becomes the last link to a history that never happened. There is another twist. When a hero removes their own birthplace from the timeline, they must live with the knowledge that they no longer belong. They must decide who they are without origin or recognition. Their victory removes their foundation, yet they remain upright. In a world without the hero's struggle, there might be no need for someone like them. They become out of place, not because the world rejects them, but because the world no longer requires what shaped them. The revolution succeeded so well that the person who made it possible became unnecessary. The unborn revolution tells a quiet truth about change. Real progress sometimes erases the story of how we got there. Heroes vanish when the world becomes what it should have been all along. We like to think causes always come before their effects. We expect a reason to appear first and a result to follow. Drop a pebble, then hear the splash. Strike a match, then see the flame. This order feels so basic that we rarely question it. But time travel raises an unsettling idea. What if some effects wait for their causes? What if a reason arrives late, but the result appears on time? The universe might allow an event to happen first and supply its origin only after the fact. Imagine someone named Mira, who studies ancient technology. She discovers a strange object buried deep in rock. It looks modern, made of materials her field does not yet use. She finds engravings in a language no one recognizes. The object becomes famous. People photograph it. Scientists argue about where it came from. It inspires materials research and motivates a new generation of engineers. Years pass. Those engineers create new alloys. They develop new designs. One day, Mira builds a time device based on lessons learned from the mysterious object. Mira uses the machine to travel thousands of years into the past. She brings with her a tool made from new alloys, shaped with the designs that came from studying the original artifact. The tool breaks during the trip. She buries the pieces to avoid contamination. Those pieces are the same object found in the rock. The effect, innovation, came long before its cause, her trip into the past. The timeline completed the story, but in reverse. The universe waited to provide the origin until the loop needed closing. This kind of event forms a causal loop. One moment depends on another, even if that dependency runs backward. The cause does not disappear. It simply shows up late. We can explore a quieter example. A child named Eri receives a medal during a school event. The medal shows symbols Eri cannot read, but it becomes important. Eri keeps it for years. The medal gives comfort during difficult times. It becomes a reminder that hope exists. That sense of hope leads Eri into a career helping others. Later, Eri joins a mission involving time travel. The team needs a symbol to represent unity among people. Eri suggests the design on the medal. They forge it into a real object. and carry it during a historic moment. Aerie sees a chance to make a child feel what they once felt. They slip the medal into the past when visiting their younger self's school. The tradition continues. The medal becomes its own beginning. The hope arrives first. The cause follows. Sometimes this loop involves a warning. A scientist named Devon discovers that a new experiment will create a huge accident. He panics and sends a message to the past, telling himself to stop the work. The earlier Devon gets the message. He cancels the experiment. The accident never occurs. But if the accident never occurs, then the future Devon has no reason to send the message. The warning remains, even though the cause that justified it has vanished from the timeline. The message appears self-generated. The cause waited. It did not vanish. The same structure can shape relationships. A woman meets someone who gives her trust and strength during a hard year. Their friendship lifts her out of fear. Later, time travel becomes possible, and she meets a younger version of her friend who is struggling. She offers comfort in the same words that once saved her. Each act fuels the other. The reason she helps is because she was helped. The reason she was helped is because she helped. The loop holds the connection. Neither person starts it. The feeling arrives from a future moment already shaped by the bond. Delayed origins also affect memory. A man dreams of a building he has never seen. Years later, he stands in front of that same structure during a time travel mission. The dream may not have been imagination. It may have been a memory sent backwards, waiting for the moment that would give it meaning. His mind held the effect until the cause reached back. These patterns challenge how we define beginning points. We are used to tracing origins, like roots running down into older soil. But a circular universe hides its roots. The plant feeds itself. The loop sits balanced. It needs no start. One explanation for this kind of structure lies in self-consistency. The universe might prefer timelines that hold together without contradictions. If a loop keeps information intact, the universe may allow it. A cause can wait as long as the result demands it. The order does not disturb the logic as long as everything fits in the circle. Another view focuses on meaning rather than sequence. An event matters because of what it changes, not because of where it began. If a discovery helps society, the timeline keeps the discovery. It does not require a clear first inventor. If a relationship strengthens lives, the timeline keeps the bond. It does not require a clear first act of kindness. When an origin arrives late, the universe does not treat it as a mistake. It treats it as completion. A loop closes. The circle becomes whole. Effects do not depend on the calendar. Causes can wait as long as they need to, and the world continues to move forward, even if the push from behind arrives after the step is taken.
We rely on cause and effect to make sense of the world. A match lights. The flame spreads. Heat turns wood into ash. Every moment pushes the next one forward. We depend on this push. It gives us confidence that time moves. But certain time travel ideas challenge this comfort. They describe places or moments where the sequence breaks. Events refuse to follow through. The clock does not tick. In these paradox zones, the future cannot form and the past cannot settle. Time holds still because moving would create a contradiction. Imagine a traveler named Celine, who steps into the past to stop a mistake she once made. That mistake changed her life. She stands outside her younger self's apartment, ready to intervene. She knows that if she arrives at the right moment, she can prevent years of regret. She knocks on the door. No one answers. She waits and tries again. Still nothing. She checks the time. The moment she remembers should already be happening. Yet nothing in the hallway feels alive. The lights hum without flicker. A door down the hall stands half open, frozen in place as though someone paused mid-exit. The world around her looks still but not silent. It feels like a system waiting for a decision that cannot resolve. Celine tries to move forward. She reaches for the doorknob again. Her hand slows without effort, like she is moving through thick air. Words form in her mind, but sound refuses to leave her throat. She is stuck in a moment that cannot progress because her presence threatens the chain that produced her. If she prevents the mistake, the version of herself who traveled back will never exist. The timeline senses the risk. It refuses to move. This frozen state protects the world from collapse. It stops the traveler from removing the reason she arrived. Action becomes impossible, not because someone forbids it, but because time cannot allow motion that destroys its own foundation. Consider a simpler case. A man named Arlo wants to delete a message he once sent that led to a harsh argument. He returns to the seconds before he pressed send. His younger self sits at a desk. The phone glows on the table. Arlo reaches to grab it. His hand hovers above the screen and will not close the distance. The message sits in a delicate balance. If he stops it, the argument does not happen. Arlo would never want to return, so he would never be here. The system locks. The clock stands still, because cause and effect cancel each other. Without one, the other dissolves. In physics, we sometimes talk about boundary conditions, requirements that solutions must satisfy to remain consistent. A paradox zone acts like a boundary condition for time. It prevents actions that would break coherence. Time holds its breath until the contradiction passes. Frozen causality can also appear at a distance. Imagine a researcher sending a letter to an earlier period, warning scientists not to build a dangerous reactor. The letter arrives. The scientists read it and never build the machine. But if the machine never becomes a threat, why would the letter exist? The timeline stalls at the moment where the warning should take effect. The decision cannot finalize. Meetings drag with no conclusion. The project sits on hold. No one can explain why progress stops, but they feel stuck. The system waits for a stable outcome. A paradox zone does not need dramatic changes to hold time still. It can occur when a minor shift threatens a major one. A child might pick up a coin that would have changed a stranger's path years later. If that path affects a key future event, the child's hand may simply hesitate. The coin rolls away before any choice is made. Time protects itself quietly. Some people imagine these zones like glitches in a game. The world does not break. It refuses input that would create errors. But the effect is stranger when you imagine living inside it. You feel like you are moving in a dream. You try to make a choice. The choice seems ready, but the action never completes. The sensation can feel like doubt, distraction, or inconvenience, yet it might be time resisting you. Frozen causality can show up in memory too. Someone might recall a plan to change something important. They prepare for days, but when the moment comes, they do nothing. Later, they wonder why they failed. The memory becomes unclear. The intention remains. The act never forms. Their mind moved forward. Time did not. The idea challenges our confidence in free will.
We believe we choose freely because we do not see the parts of the world that filter our choices. If time blocks only the contradictions, we might never notice the filter. We chalk it up to hesitation or chance. Not every paradox triggers a freeze. Sometimes the timeline bends into a loop that keeps events consistent. But when a loop cannot form and erasing a cause creates too much instability, the timeline takes a simpler option. It stops. The contradiction never matures. The action never leaves the mind of the person who thought it. Time remains standing still, not for hours or days, but for the instant that matters. That instant becomes a locked chamber, and the clock that should measure it refuses to tick. Travelers like Celine and Arlo face the same wall. The paradox waits. The timeline waits. And in that waiting, the world protects itself from collapsing under the weight of an impossible choice. We usually treat the timeline like a single road. If someone tries to change the past, we expect cracks to form. The old events resist. Paradoxes appear. Logic breaks under the weight of contradiction. But there is another way to think about time. Instead of one road, imagine many. When one path risks collapse, the universe might create a new branch. The change does not destroy history. It steps into a different version of it. The multiverse becomes a set of invisible loopholes that keep time stable. Picture someone named Neve. She learns that a great storm will destroy her hometown in the future. She cannot accept that outcome. When she gains access to time travel, she returns to the week before the storm forms. She warns people. They build defenses and change plans. The storm hits, but the damage is mild. Neve returns home expecting comfort. Instead, she finds confusion. The street layout is different. Familiar faces look past her like she is a stranger. Her own house belongs to someone else. She feels panic rising. Then she sees a clue. A date on a newspaper shows the same day, but a different history. The storm still came in her old world, but not here. Her actions created a new branch. She saved a place she cannot fully belong to. Neve did not break the timeline. She slid into another one. The multiverse idea suggests that every major choice leads to a split. If a traveler prevents a cause, the original timeline keeps the cause and its results. The new timeline grows from the corrected event. That way, nothing contradicts itself. One world contains the loss, another holds the rescue. We can see this idea in smaller moments as well. A young musician decides whether to perform at an open mic. In one world, nerves keep them home. In another, they step on stage and meet someone who will change their life. The future diverges quietly. No one notices the split. The worlds drift apart under the surface. Now add time travel. A traveler sees regret in a life that fell toward silence. They go back and encourage the musician to perform. The musician does. The relationship forms. But the traveler no longer returns to the same future. They step into the version where music shaped different outcomes. The original future still exists, holding the loneliness they once tried to repair. The traveler simply left it behind. This approach solves the paradox of changing the past. A contradiction becomes a fork instead of a break. Imagine a scientist named Rami who tries to remove a dangerous discovery from the record. He travels back and hides the notes before anyone sees them. But he does not erase the future where the notes sparked harm. That future continues. Rami just moves into a new version where the discovery never happens. The price is separation. He cannot return to the world he saved because that world was never threatened. Invisible loopholes keep both stories intact. They allow change without forcing the timeline to repair itself through force or stillness. The timeline does not freeze and does not collapse. It branches. This structure raises new questions. If every change creates a new world, what happens to the people left behind in the old one? They still face the old disaster. They still mourn the original losses. A traveler might help someone somewhere, but not everywhere. Responsibility becomes split among infinite versions. The hero can never save all worlds. They only choose which branch they prefer to witness. Even simple acts can cause these divisions. A person who tells a relative not to take a risky job might create a version of life where the relative lives safely. But the version where the warning never came continues. That version holds the pain. Both feel real to someone. This can unsettle the traveler. They might wonder whether they saved anyone at all. If the original world remains unchanged and unresolved, then what did the effort accomplish? The answer depends on perspective. For the people in the new branch, the change means everything. For the traveler's sense of morality, the victory may feel incomplete. There is also the question of identity. If two versions of someone exist after a split, which one holds the true self? Some argue that each remains valid. Others feel a tighter pull toward the version that remembers the act of changing time. The traveler may carry memory across worlds like a signature of origin. Loops and paradoxes push timelines toward impossible structure when we assume only one path exists. Multiverses remove the strain. They take confusion and divide it into separate stories that no longer clash. Each path holds its own cause and effect. Each path has its own logic. Time no longer needs to protect a single line from breaking. It simply creates room for another. Invisible loopholes rescue time from collapse by letting contradiction step aside instead of forcing it to stay. The traveler learns that change does not rewrite the world they knew. It builds a new one alongside it. They leave no cracks, only branches.